Hello, everyone. Welcome to the stream. This is our A+ study group stream. It's the pre-show, as you can tell by what I've got going on there. I can't even see what's going on because I myself have not turned everything on yet. The lights are on, but apparently no one's home. There we go. Hi, everybody. Welcome. Let's turn up some volume so I can hear myself in the headset. YouTube is complaining about bandwidths and bit rates and nonsense. Although I have amazing throughput right now to my internet service provider, so there may be a problem somewhere in the cloud, somewhere in the internets, somewhere. There's a problem with somebody's internet connection. But we're going to see how it goes. Those of you, hello chat room, those of you in the chat room can give me an update on how things are looking. And I realize if we're having a problem, it will be a very, very difficult study group to follow. But we'll see how well we can do with that. It's disappointing, though, that I'm seeing those kinds of things. Well, if we're looking good, maybe we'll get just enough video through that you'll be able to see what's going on. It's very disappointing to see that, though. So I've got some work to do after this to figure those things out. But there's always something. We're ready to go here. And if it does turn out to look bad, I will upload an HD version, a 1080p version when we're done here because we are recording. Here's my little Cylons going. We're good to go there. Let's do a check of cameras. See what's going on there. There's camera 1, camera 2, camera 3. And we should probably get... Now it tells me the stream is good. We're just going to go with it and see what happens. How bad can it be, right? And here's a camera 4 with me in it. Hi. That works out pretty darn well. I like it. Okay, let's straighten up my screen here. I've got too many windows of things that are all over the place. So let's make different windows, different sizes. This needs to be a little bit smaller. There we go. And the event chat, which I'm constantly watching, is also needing a resize. There we go. All right. Do we have everything? Are we good? My calendar's telling me there's a live study group today, so there must be a live study group today. Let's bring up the keynote. And get that ready to go. Hopefully it will find everything. If I push that button, do we get a green light? Yes, we do. Well, I think we're almost ready. Then. I've got questions. I'll be asking them. Hopefully you'll be able to answer them. If you are watching this over on YouTube, you're not on ProfessorMesser.com, then you don't see a chat. The chat's over at ProfessorMesser.com/live. And that will get you to the chat and the video. It'll be video and a chat. It's a bonus. One of each for everything. What else do we need to do? I think that's it. I think it's the important part right there. Do I have everything up on the screen that I need to? Of course not. What else do I need to have here? I think I need to have some of these things here. I can log in. Let's get the login. Excellent. Let's get those going. Let's start this up. Let's have that thing there. There's too many screens. Too many. Let's click that. And let's do a thing. Maybe this one. We'll start that one up. See, there's always something. How are we doing on time? We got 3 minutes, everybody. 3 minutes. And we will get this thing going. I've got a lot there. So let's see how we do with keeping those things together. Okay, that podcast intro was done before you got here. That can go away. Let's get the other screen up there so I can see the Q&A. Very nice. That should all work well. All right, Brian, nice job for passing the 901 and 902 for your A+. Congratulations. Guy passed the 901 last Thursday, working on the 902. Excellent. I've got both 901 and 902 questions in here today, so it should help a bit. There's a few there. We can talk more about that. It's all kinds of interesting things. I think we have 2 minutes or so to go. Let me check and make sure the tweet went out. Well, the tweeter. Let's see if it did. Tweeter. There's too many tweets there. Come on, tweeter. Yeah, there it is. Very nice. Server Plus. Everybody's working on Server Plus all of a sudden. It's just a big, like 2 people have said, I need Server Plus. Like it's been 9 months since I heard the word Server Plus, and then 2 people this week. So that's what the average is. 2 people in 9 months would like Server Plus. I don't know what that's about. It's something like that. So that's something anyway. Okay. With that, we got about a minute. We're going to be jumping into. It's nice there. Okay, we're going to jump into this thing. First hour will be the Q&A, and then second hour we'll open up the phone lines. Get those, hopefully. Assuming that this works at all. I'm guessing it is, so we're going to see. You're planning on taking 901 and 902 the same day. Is that a bad idea? It's not just a bad idea. It's an exceptionally bad idea. Why would you do that to yourself? I mean, if you're very familiar, you've been doing this for 10 years, and you know Windows with your eyes closed, and you know how to put a computer together, and maybe that makes sense. But for the vast, vast majority of us, that's a really, really bad idea. Super bad idea. Unless, of course, you're fine with it, which means it's a perfectly good idea. So there, you never know. Let's do a study group, everybody. Here we go. We're going to start this thing right now. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the May 2018 Professor Messer A+ study group, coming to you live from the Messer Studios headquarters in Tallahassee, Florida. Thank you for joining us on this live stream or the replay if you're watching after the fact. We've got the whole library of study groups all replayed and ready for you on ProfessorMesser.com. If you're watching this on YouTube, you may want to head over to ProfessorMesser.com/live because we've got a chat room there. I'll be answering questions from the chat room, talking with folks there. We've been going back and forth during the pre-show. During this first hour, I'm going to be asking questions of you, and you're going to live and online be able to answer them. I'll explain how all of that works in just a moment. We've also got a lot in the second hour. I'll just open up the phone lines and you can ask questions about anything, really. We've got plenty there to go through. There's a lot to cover, and I try to just make everything chock full of different things to do. Otherwise, what's the point of being here, right? This is the study group I do every month. You can, of course, go back and look at the replays. The study group replays are available on the website. There's the phone number. Later on, we'll put the phone number up. You'll be able to call in. If you call in now, you won't be able to talk. We'll wait until the second hour. You'll know when. Don't forget to follow what we're doing on YouTube. I have just finished posting 101 Network Plus videos on YouTube. So that may be something you want to check out. Go to ProfessorMesser.com/YouTube to subscribe and click the thing that makes the bell with the stuff. There's also Twitter. Every day you'll get an A+ Twitter, so you've got that available as well. Make sure you follow us every day for the daily pop quiz at ProfessorMesser.com/Twitter, and you've got vouchers there. There's a lot going on there. So I've got plenty for you to look at. Somewhere in this first hour, by the way, I'm going to give you an instruction or code that has to do with earning CEUs, which you may or may not choose to do. Not everybody does, but there are some available there that you can, of course, come and participate with that as well. Stay tuned for that. Sometime in this first hour, I'll give you all the instructions then. A lot of people will ask me about that. Today, we're going to do questions and answers that come from the 220-901 exam and the 220-902 exam. This is the A+ exam that was released on December the 15th, 2015. So it's been almost 3 years. It'll be 3 years at the end of this year. Usually every 3 years, CompTIA tends to update the exam. So you may see a new version of the A+ exam in December. It still gives you plenty of time to study in these existing ones. Plus, they usually do a 6-month overlap. So you have another 6 months after that. So realistically, at this time next year, you could still be taking the 901 and 902. So for those of you that have sent me questions saying, should I wait for the new one? No. Never wait to get certified. There's no good reason to wait. And secondly, why would you wait? There's plenty to cover right now with the 901, 902, and you'll be able to take this exam this time next year, so why not do that? If you are already certified with your A+ certification, some of you like to gather CEUs. You could just take a higher level CompTIA exam. You won't have to collect CEUs. There is a renewal exam from CompTIA that you can do at home. They have someone who watches you over your webcam. If that's not creepy for you, then maybe that's an option. You can take that renewal exam. There's no CEU fees if you do that. There's also, I didn't put on this screen, CompTIA has a single CertMaster class you can take online at your convenience. And if you finish the class, which they say is 4 to 6 hours, you're renewed. I don't know why everybody just doesn't do that one. And also no need to do any CEU payments with that one either. So that may be the easiest way to do it. Now, if you're already getting a Network Plus or Security Plus or higher level exam, maybe that's the better way, but you have options. That's the important thing, is that you have options. The 901 and 902 exam have a lot of different things that you need to know. Everything from hardware to security to networking to operating systems to Linux to Windows to Mac OS to everything seems to be in there. It is a very broad series of exams. And someone in the chat room, in fact, asked, should I take both of them at the same time? And I usually recommend no, unless you're somebody who's been in the industry forever and you know this stuff cold, and this is sort of a refresh for you. First, I'm not sure why you'd be taking the exam at that point. There may be a good reason for it, but there's usually no good reason to take both at the same time. Study for one, take that exam, then shift gears and study for two and take that exam. That may be the best way to do it. I also have questions you may want to look at. There is a couple of books I wrote that's nothing but questions. And here I just skipped right over it. 1,300 questions when you combine both the 901 and the 902 books together. It's a multiple choice. They are performance-based. You can find out more about that at professormesser.com/PQC. But I've got free tests online, free questions available for you. Hundreds of A+ questions are available online. You can find that on my website, professormesser.com/popquiz. We like free. Free is good. I also have free the podcast version of these study groups. Both my A+ Network Plus and Security Plus study groups are all available at professormesser.com/podcasts. So you can find everything you need replay-wise in an audio version for that. So have a look at the podcasts at the website. Today, though, we're going to be doing Q&A. So you can follow along and answer these questions if you are watching this live. Now, if you're on the replay, this won't work for you. But if you're watching live, go to professormesser.com/QA. It will take you right to the Socrative site and directly into the room. There's even a question waiting for you right now if you go to professormesser.com/QA. You can also download the Socrative app from the app store that your particular device uses, and you'll want to use the room name Professor Messer, PROFESSORMESSER. So there's something you can go through. Now, if you are doing that, if you go to professormesser.com/QA, there will be a question waiting for you. It's actually a question from last month for those of you thinking about what did we talk about last month. The question is, your Soho router includes an interface labeled DMZ. Which of these would best describe this interface? And there are options available. It's a multiple choice question. Option A is it's used for internal communication only. Option B is it's an encrypted tunnel endpoint for remote access. Option C is it's used to upgrade the operating system. Option D is it's a local serial connection. And option E is unrestricted access from external devices. And you can see 75% of you or so have said it's E, unrestricted access from external devices. You must have been here last month because that is the correct question for this. These come directly from all of the CompTIA exam videos that I have created and one dealing with firewalls and DMZ ports happens to be section 2.6 of the 22901. I have a video there called Configuring a Soho Wireless Router, and that is where we get that option. So if you did actually answer E, unrestricted access from external devices, that's correct. So a lot of you already in here, you've seen Socrative. It seems to be working. This is all good. So next step will be to do more new questions you've not seen before. I write a whole brand new set of questions for this, and we'll do some 22901 and 22902 exam Q&A questions. So that's what this next set of questions will be. One of the things that you'll notice, by the way, when you step into your exam, the first set of questions you're going to get are not going to be multiple choice questions. They will be questions about anything but multiple choice. They might be fill in the blank. They might be matching. They might be putting you at a command line and asking you to perform a function. They might be having you put things in order from top to bottom, from bottom to top, from smallest to largest, from fastest to slowest. Who knows what they might do, but it'll be anything but a multiple choice question. So I like to begin our study groups with one of these, what CompTIA calls performance-based questions, for you to be able to answer. So here is our performance-based question of the month. This is a question with a lot of detail in it, so let's read through it. This performance-based question asks you to match the Windows utility to the function. And some of these functions will not have a match. So here's the 4 Windows utilities. Number 1 is the local security policy. Number 2 is the ODBC data sources. Number 3 is performance monitor. And number 4 is computer management. Now we need to find a match for these. And I have a list from A through G of things that might match up. There's only one match for these. If you think they're in order, you would say 1A, 2B, 3C, and 4D. They're not in order, of course. So let me give you what these might be. A is your spreadsheet includes information from a Microsoft Access database. B is that you use a single console to access account information and view available disk space. C is add a new partition to a hard drive. D is require a new password after 30 days. E is you will be contacted if CPU utilization exceeds 50%. F is remove a job from the print queue, and G is get more details about an error that occurs during login. So now we need to match these up. Now, if you think you know the answers, you need to go to professormesser.com/QA and put a 1A, 2B, 3C, and 4D in there, or whatever it happens to be. Do not put it in the chat room. We're going to all pretend we're actually taking the exam. So we don't want to put any type of guesses or any other information into the chat room about these particular questions. So this is, by the way, there's no way to do matching with Socrative. So it's really just a blank, a fill in the blank that you have here. Hopefully some of you can see that performance-based question and be able to put, I'm starting to see some answers coming in right now, as a matter of fact, with those. So good. Now you have an idea of what those things are and how they work. Hopefully you're very familiar. This is definitely a 22902 question. So we are getting a lot of details in here for operating system Windows utilities. That's something you won't see on the 22901. I keep hitting my microphone today. Sorry about that. I must be flailing around my arms more than normal. One of the things I will often tell people is that these questions at the beginning of the exam are pretty involved. There's a lot of detail to these questions. So I often, as a strategy, recommend that some people skip over these questions, go through all the multiple choice, and then at the end come back and try to attack the performance-based questions. That's one of the things that becomes pretty useful. Hopefully that's something you've been able to try or think about. You have to really manage your time properly during the exam to do that correctly. But I find that going through the multiple choice questions tends to jog my memory about things that I could use for the performance-based questions. So that might be a good strategy for you as well. Plus, you get those questions first thing when you sit down. So that's another challenge, is trying to get through the adrenaline and the worry, and you've started the exam and everything's happening in fast motion. So hopefully that's something you can think about doing. If you think you know the answers, go to professormesser.com/QA, and you'll be able to answer those questions too. Let's see how I did with this. Let's see what I think these are. So here's our answers. Let's go through some of these. These are 1-to-1. So let's take the first one. A local security policy is our number one. And I match that with the D, require a new password after 30 days. And that's exactly what you would have in a local security policy. There's much more in a local security policy, but that is the one that fits best. That's the only one that really fits of A through G. So the answer D, require a new password after 30 days, fits perfectly with a local security policy. Number 2 is an ODBC data sources. ODBC, the open database format. The idea of connecting these open databases, and this is what the ODBC, the Open Database Connector, does, is allow you to access different types of databases from Windows. It's a shim that sits between Windows and the database. So access SQL Server, MySQL, any other type of database. You can use ODBC to be able to build a bridge between your operating system and that database. So your spreadsheet includes information from a Microsoft Access database. That's option A. That's a very common ODBC function. Let's do the performance monitor, number 3. And I chose E for that one. E is you will be contacted if CPU utilization exceeds 50%. We know performance monitor will, of course, monitor CPU utilization, but you may not realize there's also an alarming function inside of it as well. It can inform you when certain values inside a performance monitor go above or below a certain value. So that may be something also to consider doing. If you're ever working with performance monitor, it's a nice little utility. And the last one, number 4, computer management. And I chose B, use a single console to access account information and view available disk space and do many other things as well from the computer management screen. There's a lot of functionality. You can bring up one console and then skip around to the utilities that you need. So for those of you that are following along, number 1 was D, number 2 was A, number 3 was E, and number 4 was B. So hopefully that's something that you're familiar with. And if you're not familiar with these Windows utilities, they are absolutely part of the 22902 exam. Make sure you're very familiar. Folks in the chat room were even saying, so I got some of them right. I got some of them wrong. Do you get partial credit on the exam? CompTIA never tells their specific grading their grading format. They never explain how things are graded on the CompTIA exam. So one of the things that you do have to worry is that maybe you don't get full credit. They have said that some performance-based questions may provide partial credit, but they don't tell you which ones. So that becomes a little bit more of a challenge to have that there. So hopefully that's one where you were able to do that and know those answers on these too. Make sure you know those Windows utilities. Let's go to a multiple choice question though. So let's absolutely hit the right answers for these. I've got a multiple choice question. Our second question of the day, which of these would be the best way to configure SSO in Windows? Which of these would be the best way to configure SSO, whatever that is, in Windows? We have some options available for you. Would it be A, connect to a Windows domain, B, use a flash drive, C, restore from a recovery partition, D, run as an elevated user, or E, connect your phone over Bluetooth? One of these would be the best way to configure SSO in Windows. If you know the answer, go to professormesser.com/QA. No answering in the chat room. And maybe you'll know the answer to this one as well. So hopefully that will be something you can do. Now, some of you have said there are other things in that first question I can do with computer management, but they weren't directly related to the function of computer management. You always have to choose the best answer on the exam. And very often you may get 2 or 3 answers that could technically be correct given the question. But the questions are always asking for the best answer. So you have to find the one that really fits the best to be able to answer those. So hopefully that's one you can do as well. step through all of those. Let's have a look at how we did. In fact, I'm going to see how we're doing with this one. I think we're doing pretty well with this one. Yes, Event Viewer is in computer management, but the description that I provided for computer management showed you used both one function, two different functions at the same time in the same utility. That really is the best answer. It's not a Microsoft answer. It's not a CompTIA answer. That's the answer. That's exactly the best fit for computer management. Hopefully that's one that, go have a look at computer management. It's a nifty little utility. You'll be able to see that. Let's see how we did with SSO and Windows though. How do we do? Which of these would be the best way to configure SSO in Windows? 51% of you said connect to a Windows domain. And 31% of you said run as an elevated user. So hopefully it's got to be one of those, right? 9% said use a flash drive, 8% said restore from a recovery partition, and 1% said connect your phone over Bluetooth. So that's the important part of this, is trying to figure out first what SSO is, and then we need to go through and figure out more details from there. SSO is what we call single sign-on. Single sign-on is not just a Windows function. Single sign-on is a way that you can put in credentials one time, regardless of the operating system you're using, regardless of the system you happen to be connecting to. You put in your credentials one time, and that's it. From that point on, you have access to all of the resources and all of the things that you should normally have access to without having to put in your credentials again. And these resources could be scattered around the network. You may not have even touched some of these credentials yet, but yet you still have access to some of those things as well. Hopefully this is one wherever you start getting into more details about single sign-on, this is where you would absolutely make this happen on a Windows domain. You can see, in fact, for single sign-on, Windows domain handles it quite nicely. It's one of the nice parts about Windows. You put in your credentials one time, and now you can map to drives that you need to map to. You can print to printers. You never have to put in a username and password again. So to be able to do that, to be able to enable that single sign-on function in Windows, you need to join a Windows domain so you have access to all of this. So the best choice, of course, was A, connect to a Windows domain. 52% of you got that one absolutely correct. Well done with that. You would not run as an elevated user to configure SSO in Windows. There's nothing about running as an elevated user that automatically allows you now to use single sign-on. You would have to still use some type of overarching system, some type of authentication system that supports single sign-on. In the case of Windows, it's Kerberos. So it would not be run as an elevated user. Use a flash drive? Well, flash drive has nothing to do with single sign-on. So that would not be the best choice either. Or restore from a recovery partition. Nope, has nothing to do with signing on one time. So that would not be the correct answer. And connecting your phone over Bluetooth doesn't help with single sign-on, and only 1% of you thought it would anyway. So that didn't fool anybody with a single sign-on. So hopefully, if you've ever gotten to a point where you are working with all of your Windows domain configurations, and if you get stuck on a help desk and you're in there every day going through the details of the help desk and trying to figure out how to get somebody logged into the domain, you'll be working with this single sign-on. So it's a great place to be able to have that functionality. Let's do another question though. If you're working with, and by the way, I do put here at the bottom of these, you can see this is a 220.902 question from section 3.3 Windows security settings. So if you're following along, you're trying to figure out what video is that from, it's at the bottom of those answer pages on each one of these. Let's do another question. Let's skip over and do a 901 question. The question is, one of the Android tablets in your office is running low on storage space. Which of these would be the best method of increasing the amount of available storage? Again, there's that question about which would be the best method. And it could be that more than one of these answers would work, but only one is the best. And let's see what our possible options are. It would be A, upgrade to a newer tablet. It would be B, add an SD card. It would be C, connect the tablet to Google Drive. It would be D, use an external USB drive. Or E, compress the file system. one of the Android tablets in your office is running low on storage space. Which of these would be the best method of increasing the amount of available storage? Android, actually any mobile device. My tablet constantly running low on storage space. It's important to know what your options might be. If you think you know what the right option is, go to professormesser.com/QA, and you can put in the options that are available there. Might be something you can try. And if you have an Android device, you probably are already familiar with what this particular option might be. You may have noticed, in fact, in the answers, there might be 1, 2, 3. Actually, all 5 of them could be viable, could be technically the right answer, but only one of these is the best answer. Yeah, all of them are good. All of them are good answers. But we really are talking about the best answer. And that's the one you really want to focus on, is finding the best answer. Let's see, in fact, what we think the best answer might be. Let's see how we did. 76% of you said B, add an SD card. 16% of you said C, connect the tablet to Google Drive. 6% said compress the file system. And then we got a tie for fourth between A, upgrading to a newer tablet, which I think is the right answer, quite honestly, or use an external USB drive. I'm always looking for an opportunity to upgrade. So why wouldn't I use this as the opportunity? Well, because there's a much less expensive option available if you need to upgrade how much storage space you have in an Android device. This is not an option you have on an iOS, on an Apple iOS device. You would just use a SD or micro SD card, depending on what that particular device allows or has available. And that's one that does come in handy. Oh, I didn't put factory reset. That would have been a good option as well. That would have been a perfect option. Is just reset it. These Android devices are great. You just have an option on most Android devices have this option. It's a nice one to have where you simply slide in more storage space, and now you've got more place to put these. So that comes handy. Not all of them do. Some folks in the chat room saying, yeah, my Nexus 9 doesn't have a slot for that. It's one of those things that we're trying to figure out what is the right number of options for these devices. And the manufacturers keep switching us around with different ideas of what they think the best options might be. But if you have an SD card, that's going to be a pretty good option between the ones that are available here. So let's look at the different options. We know that add an SD card is the right answer at 77%. What about connect the tablet to Google Drive, which allows you to store things on the internet, but it doesn't allow you local storage. And you would have to be connected to the internet to have access to whatever you put out on Google Drive. Compress the file system. If that is an option for what you're trying to do, that might help if it's an option. And in Android, not always an option of what's available. It's actually something the operating system does on its own. You don't generally have access to click a button and compress the file system like you do in Windows, Linux, Mac OS. You have options to compress those file systems. You don't have those options on these mobile devices. Let's see, 2% said use an external USB drive. You imagine carrying around your tablet and then having a separate USB drive that you're carrying around that will plug into your mobile device. Not a great option. And upgrading to a newer tablet, as I said, I think that's the best option. Only 1% of you did, and probably a good idea that you don't, because that's a lot of money to spend on a new tablet when all you really needed to do was plug in another SD card. Some of you are giving other options for some reason that weren't given in the question. And this is something very common on the exam. You'll find the thing that you would do is not listed in here. In fact, some of you said, well, I delete some of the things I'm not using. What if that's not an option? What if you don't have anything you can delete? Well, and it obviously wasn't an option here either. So that's one of those things, is that you have to be able to have that second option available. You have to know every possible best next step given the ones that are available to you. And that's how that came about as well. So if you answered B, add an SD card, got that one absolutely right. Well done. There is plenty to know on the A+ exam, especially, well, there's two exams, of course. There's the 22901 exam and the 22902 exam. And of course, all of my videos are available for you to watch. You can go through every single one of them absolutely free, the entire course. Nothing is behind a paywall. You don't have to register for anything. You simply go to ProfessorMaster.com and the entire course is available for you to watch, all absolutely free. And I always recommend go through the course and make your notes as you're going through these videos. But not everybody has time to go through every single possible option available for looking at all of these notes and writing down every video and going through everything that's there. So I've already done it for you. I've written down all of the important pieces you need to know from these exams, and I put them into a set of course notes, one for the 22901 and one for the 22902. Here they are. These are digital documents, PDFs that you can get that have information for the 901 that includes things like processors and DDR speeds and information about networking. And then you've got security and Windows and other operating systems available in the 902 study group content. These course notes are extensive. And Mrs. Professor Messer said I need a physical version of these too. So I made a physical version of the course notes available. And when you buy the physical version, you also get the digital version available for free. So it's another nice bonus because it does cost a little more for the printed version because these dead trees for some reason are expensive and the colors that are going to the pages are expensive too. So I think she was right too. Well, Mrs. Professor Messer is always right. So of course she was. So if you're trying to find something that's more of a paper document, perfect bound, softback book, that's a good way to do it. You can find out more about the digital version that you can download immediately or this printed version that I print up on demand and send to you at ProfessorMester.com/A+CN for the A+ course notes. This is how we keep this whole thing going, by the way, is your support of these products. Thank you for your ongoing support in your purchase already of these course notes. And thank you for the folks that are already considering getting these. There's course notes available for A+, Network Plus, Security Plus. And some people say, I want to contribute to your site. Well, I don't take contributions. I don't take somebody contributing without giving you something back. And this is the something I like to give back are these course notes. You can find that at ProfessorMester.com/A+CN. Let's do another question for these. Let's get all of these for these available. Here is the next question. I guess I need to click the button on my side too so that you can see the next question. When you start your Windows 8.1 workstation, you receive the message, one or more services failed to start. Which of these can provide you with more information about this error? And I've seen this error more than once. So you do want to know how to figure out what's going on. Which of these would provide you with more information about this error? Would it be A, Event Viewer, B, Console, C, Performance Manager, D, Process Monitor, or E, Terminal? When you start your Windows 8.1 workstation, you receive the message, one or more services failed to start. Which of these can provide you with more information about this error? If you think you know the answer, go to ProfessorMester.com/QA. You can answer in real time. As I mentioned, if you're watching the replay, you can't participate. You can only watch and see what everybody else is doing. You'll find there's no question there waiting for you when you go to ProfessorMester.com/QA. One of these days, we're going to figure that part out. Figure out the details of this. I'm one of those people that I hate to, some folks in the chat room said, well, just reimage. That takes care of it. Well, that certainly would. I'm one of those people, though, I hate to reimage. I hate to back everything up, reinstall fresh, install everything back to the operating system, or use some of the built-in functions of the operating system. I like to figure out what's going on. I like to find out why that thing's happening, and I like to fix it. And when you can fix one of these annoying problems that has been just constantly causing a slowdown or an issue or messages popping up, this is really where you run into challenges with trying to figure out where can I go to find out more information about these. And you start to learn there's places you can go in the operating system to gather more details about this, to gather more information about this, to try to figure out those details. This is a good path to show. And you have a lot of third-party utilities you use to gather some of these things as well. It can be really useful to have that. Let's see how we did in this answer. You think you know this. By the way, if you're still working on the problem, you always go to professormesser.com/QA for the answer. Please don't answer in the chat room. Be something we want everybody to kind of figure out as we go along. Let's see how we did. How did we do? Let's see. 92% of you have said A, event viewer. Is this one of those where we didn't actually get it right and everybody chose something else? We'll find out. 5% said performance manager. Well, we've got 2% said process monitor, 1% said console, and 0% said terminal. Why is that? Why did nobody say terminal? Always put one in that makes no sense whatsoever. In this case, nobody bit on that particular problem. If you ever starting up your system and you get one of these errors that says one or more services failed to start, it is such a common problem that it is listed in the CompTIA exam objectives. That's how common a problem it is. They want you to know what to do when that particular issue started. It could be something related to software. It could be related to a bad driver. It could be related to bad hardware. It could be just a program that is not working properly. And it's a service, obviously. It's not a program that is interactive that pops up on our desktop. It's one of the services that runs. So now we have to try figuring out why this service isn't starting. So we need to find the service that's not starting. Usually it's listed in the error message. And you can go through and try starting it manually from the services. See if that does anything. Maybe it's a problem with account permissions. Maybe the service needs to start as the administrator account, because you can tell services, don't run as me. I'm not the administrator. Run with this special administrator login. And maybe that administrator login's password has changed. Maybe you aren't using the right login and the service can't start. We want to confirm the service dependencies. Certain services require other services running so that they can run. So you can create this whole list of hierarchy that has to occur. First, this service has to run, then this service has to run, then this service has to run, and finally, this service can run. But only if those other three services are running first. If it is a Windows service, check the files itself, reinstall the application, and of course, one of the best ways to find any of this information detailed of what's going on is to, of course, go to the event viewer. The event viewer tells you everything that's going on in the operating system, hopefully. It tells you everything that's going on in the operating system. You may not understand what it's telling you, and sometimes it is a little coy in what it's providing. It may not be in complete English language. It may not provide you exactly a huge amount of detail, but it does keep track of it and allows you to see what's going on with those different things that are going by. So make sure that you have a look to see what some of those things are inside of Event Viewer. That might point you to a direction that says it's this one. In fact, it might even tell you can't start because there is some type of permissions problem. And you can go through and find more detail about that in your services. But for those of you that are using these utilities in Windows, you know it is a Event Viewer. That is absolutely the right answer. 92% of you got those absolutely correct. This, by the way, came from the 22902 exam questions. This is videos in the 4.1 section, and the video is operating system troubleshooting. That's where that one comes from. To get more information about those, let's get another question in. We got more here we can go through. Here's another question for you, another Windows question. Your Windows workstation continually loops through reboots. Let me click on during the startup process. Your Windows workstation continually loops through reboots during the startup process. It doesn't sound good, by the way. Which of the following would be the best next step for troubleshooting this issue? Would it be A, reinstall Windows from the original installation media? Would it be B, open the computer and check for a burning smell? Would it be C, replace the memory modules? Would it be D, use F8 to boot to safe mode? Or would it be E, open the computer and disconnect the hard drive? Your Windows workstation is just continually looping through reboots during the startup process. One of those would be the best next step for troubleshooting this issue. If you think you know the answer, go to professormesser.com/QA. You'll be able, of course, to know exactly what the answer might be. Just plug it in. Try to take a guess. If you don't know, take a guess. Might be a good way to do it. Hopefully that's something you've run into. In fact, some of these I could see one or two of these, three of these could potentially be answers that could technically help you solve this problem. But that wasn't the question. The question was, which of the following would be the best next step for troubleshooting this issue? This is something they commonly do on the exam, is best next step. So you do need to have an idea of a hierarchy in your mind of what you should do first, what should you do second, what should you do third, fourth, and continue on. So hopefully the question here and the possible answers are there to kind of give you an idea of what you might be. Some of you have probably had this before. Windows is really good at doing this, by the way, of constantly starting up, especially now with the new Windows versions. I know Windows 10 isn't on the exam, but Windows 10 is now forcing upgrades to everybody, and constantly people are having problems because they'll wake up in the morning and their computer isn't booting now because it installed some new update without your permission. Well, some of you have had this problem before because 90% of you said use F8 to boot to safe mode to be able to handle something like that. Maybe that is the right thing you should be doing. We have 7% said replace the memory modules, which may be a good option. That was one of those where I said a potential answer. Definitely replace the memory modules. In fact, I think E is also a potential answer, which says open up the computer and disconnect the hard drive. 2% of you said that. Only 2% of you said reinstall Windows from the original installation media. Why not? Whenever you're having a problem, just reinstall Windows. And 1% said open the computer and check for a burning smell. So that does come into hand. Now, of course, this constant reboot problem, this is something that is listed in the CompTIA exam objectives. So you'll see this as well in here. And so you need to know what can you do to resolve this issue and have that there. By the way, I'm laughing at the folks in the chat room. We're going, oh, and instead of having Windows force updates, you can tell it not to do it. It just ignores that, by the way. It has buttons there. It's sort of like it being in an elevator and you've got a door close button and they put that there, but it really doesn't do anything. It's the same thing in Windows. So continuous reboots. How far does the boot go before rebooting? So you do need to know, is this a BIOS issue? Are we actually starting Windows? Do you get a Windows splash screen, which means you at least are starting the operating system? If you're having a problem with a bad driver or configuration or it's looping through, you can try F8 and try booting from the last known working configuration, or the option that is correct in this answer, start up in safe mode. See if there's something in the normal startup that you can have disabled because you're starting up in this safe mode. And it becomes handy to have that functionality there. And ultimately, and this is why I mentioned that replacing memory modules could potentially be one of the options, is that you could try removing hardware. Try removing some of the memory. Try removing the hard drive. See if that has any other impact. I imagine removing the hard drive would have a pretty good impact on Windows starting up. But that's one that does come into play. You have to kind of step through these problems to figure out which one of these is really going to be the issue. And that's why, in this case, I put very specific terminology into the question, which was, which of the following would be the best next step for troubleshooting this issue? And by the way, it's which of the following would be the best next step. So you only have 5 options available. Maybe that's the only thing available. Maybe you don't have access to the BIOS. Maybe you're not, somebody else has access to the BIOS. They're the administrator, you don't. So it's not even an option. So it wasn't there. So the real questions were, of all of these, which one is the best next step? And the best next step is safe mode every time. Let's just not change anything yet. Don't take anything out of the computer. Don't change anything with the hardware. Don't modify any files. Let's just try a different mode of booting up and see what happens. And that's really one of the best ways you can do this and have it there. I think that's probably one of the best ways to go through and handle a lot of different things with Windows is first, don't change anything, but see if you can work around the issue. And then you at least have a smaller grouping of things that you can use for troubleshooting. That does come in handy. So hopefully that's one of the ones that you did in here as well, was work through all of those different kinds of problems when working through these troubleshooting issues. You know, one of the things you do need to have available as a nice lab. I tell people, get a good book, go through my videos, get plenty of Q&A, and get plenty of hands-on. And when you're working through problems like this, it's nice to have hands-on, but you need to have hands-on in Windows Vista, Windows 7, and Windows 8 and 8.1, because that's what the A+ exam currently covers. So you may want to try using a cloud-based lab system like the one from GTS Learning, their live labs. You can find out information about this at professormesser.com/live labs. They have labs available that are interactive. In fact, there's screens available. I'm in their labs right now, going through the different options that are available. There's a Linux machine in here because this particular lab is set up to show me and run through these Linux devices and have them available. So there is options here. You've got a different view on the consoles you're using. Let's in fact go to the Windows console that's here and start up the Windows machine. This is a Windows Server 2008 R2, and it's really fast. I can connect to these and use it. It's a full-blown Windows machine, by the way. This is not one of those that's on rails where you can only do what the lab tells you to do. It's full-blown Windows. So you can follow the lab instructions specifically, and all the lab instructions are available for you in stepping through all of them. Or, here's my lab instructions. In fact, let's go through the first one. I'm going to click Next, and we'll go to the next page. And it takes you step by step. Start up PuTTY, connect to this device, log in, give the login credentials. It gives you all the information you need with the right IP addresses. You log in as root, and it takes you through all the details right from, okay, well, let's start up PuTTY. PuTTY to SSH into this device. Let's SSH into this machine. I don't know if I chose the right one. We'll log in as root. Does it have a password? I don't know if it does or not. I didn't look. Oh, yes, it does. Pass W0RD and password is plus. So you can step through this. And here, let's see if we can log in. PASSWORD. And there I'm logged in. And now I'm in a Linux machine in this lab. It's just that easy. They got Windows labs. The labs for 229.01 and 902 are in here. You can either just get the book that has that $35. You can have the book for the 901, 902 from GTS Learning, or the 12 months of lab along with the book, $409. But only if you follow this link. If you go to the GTS Learning website directly, you won't have these special prices. These are only for people watching the Professor Messer study group. So go to professormesser.com/live labs, and you can see all of the labs available. Ask the folks at GTS Learning any questions. There's plenty to learn from what they have there, and they're great folks to work with. I like the folks at GTS Learning, or I would not be recommending their products. Have a look at what they offer at professormesser.com/live labs. Let's do another question. I think this is a 901 question coming up. So this will be another good one to have available here. Where would you most likely see this connector used? Where would you most likely see this connector used? And I have, fortunately, multiple choices for you. So just knowing what the connector is isn't enough. You have to know how it is used. And A is motherboard, B is audio system, C is wide area network, D is external storage, and E is cable modem. Which of these would you be most likely to use that particular connector? There's a better picture of it so you can see what's going on. You do have to know connectors. You have to be able to recognize the connector and the connection that it's plugging into by sight. This is something that will help you very much as you go through your career, by the way, to be able to do that. All of those connections that are there. But not only do you have to know what it is, you have to know how to use it. So make sure you go through all of the different options of not only what this thing, what the plug is, what the connector is, and some of you probably recognize the connector and can name the connector, but how's it used? This is, you'll notice that CompTIA almost never asks you what an abbreviation means. They're always asking you how that particular abbreviation is used. So that's the concept you should have as you go through these questions, is how these are used with those. So this may be something that you've used as well. Let's see how we did on this one. How did we do with this? We got motherboard, audio system, wide area network, external storage, and cable modem. So in this particular case, there would be an option available for this. Let's see. We have 56% of folks said cable modem. 24% said audio system. 20 or 21% said wide area network. 1% said motherboard, and 0% said external storage for these particular interfaces, these particular connector types for these. So, and you could get a question on the exam that's got a picture there. And the picture here was of a BNC connector. It's a bayonet connector. That's the B in the NC. And the Neil Councilman is the pair of folks who created this particular kind of connector. It's a bayonet, which means you plug it in and you twist it and it locks in. So if you were to pull on it, it wouldn't come out of there unless you untwisted it and pulled it out of the lock. This is very commonly used on wide area networks. If you have a DS3 link coming in, it's very often brought in on coax, very often has a BNC connector at the end of it. If you're looking at a wide area network connection panel and you see BNC connectors, almost always it's a DS3 or T3 type connection to have that. Now, this isn't the only place that we use BNC connectors. BNC connectors are used for video. They are sometimes, rarely, used for audio, not very often. You do see them, though, on a number of audio. I use them for an audio-video connection inside the studio. BNC is effectively connecting all the video devices that you're seeing. So they all go back to one big patch panel, all with these SDI connectors. That's the format that it uses over these coax that have BNC on the end that I plug in. It locks in to have that there. So these are obviously coax, so they're kind of bulky to work with, but they can be handy whenever you start working with those and have them available. Of course, the question here asked very specifically, where would you most likely see this connector used? So if you are working in these types of things and going through motherboard, audio system, wide area network, external storage, and cable modem, the one that it would be most likely used on would be C, wide area network. It would not be audio system, not commonly used on audio system, and almost never used on cable modem. So C, the wide area network, is the correct answer here. You'll find them on the DS3 or the T3 type connectors for your wide area networks. You don't usually see BNC on cable modems. You usually see the F connector, where you would plug it in and twist it to have that F connector there. That is a different kind of connector than the BNC connector that we see here. This is the bayonet where you plug it in and twist it slightly and it's connected to have that there. So maybe that can help you as well as you're going through and trying to figure out what are all these different connector types. So if you answered C, wide area network connector, 21% of you got that one absolutely right. If you are watching this video for continuing education credit, this would be a great thing for you to do if you're collecting these. A lot of people don't do this anymore because they're taking higher level exams or they're taking that single-use CertMaster. The CEUs are a little bit more expensive to do, but some people still do it. There are other options available, though. So if you're watching this and you'd like to get a continuing education credit because you've already got the connection of or the idea of collecting these continuing education credits, you go to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website. There's a link there for Contact Us, and that's really Contact Me. Contact Us really comes up and allows you to brings up a menu or a form of different things. It asks you for your name. Definitely put your name in. It asks you for your email address. That's probably the more important part of this. And it asks you to put something in as a message. And in that message, you need to specify that this is the May 2018 A+ study group. And you need to put in there somewhere the special code word of BNC. And that will be able to let me know that you must have watched up to this point. So you deserve that 1 hour of webinar CEU credit. So that go to the top of the website, click Contact Us, name, email, 2018 May A+ study group, BNC, and you can put anything else in there as well. So I'm reading these as I go through. I'm probably manually going to go through these tonight and send out the continuing education updates. I do that every week. So this would be a perfect time to do it, is put those in there, and I'll make sure I get those out to you. So have a look at continuing education by follow exactly those steps as well. If you don't follow those steps, following the steps is part of earning the CEU. That way I know you watch this. I know at least somebody watched this whenever you do that. Let's do another question, though. Let's go through the details of this. Here's the question. One of your associates installing FOSS for an important project. Which of these would best describe this installation? One of your associates is installing FOSS, F-O-S-S, for an important project. Which of these would best describe this installation? Would it be A, all media used for this project will be managed through software? Would it be B, the software has specific limitations on how it can be used? C, the software is licensed on a per-seat basis? D, this quarter's budget for the project has been cut? Or E, the software includes the storage of PII? So the real question is, one of your associates is installing FOSS for an important project. Which of these would best describe this installation? How would that happen? No Googling. No Googling of the FOSS. That's not what you should be doing. You should be trying to know immediately what that is. And again, that's a good example of giving you an abbreviation and asking you, how's that used? Really didn't ask you what that particular abbreviation means. So hopefully you're familiar with this particular type of scenario when you're dealing with the FOSS, working through the FOSS pieces. Maybe that's something you've already worked through. Maybe you're already familiar with the FOSS. I don't know what I'm talking about with the FOSS, like it's a thing. Yeah, you do run into that where you're trying to figure out those things as well. Maybe you've been able to work through those anyway. You've run into that scenario. So hopefully, and don't try Googling, try taking a stab at it. See if you can guess what that happens to be. It's going to be one of the best ways to do it is try to figure that piece out yourself. This question, there's really only one good answer for this one, by the way. And it really is the best answer. I'm looking at the possible answers. It could be one or two or even three different things. Could be four. Could actually be five. It could be all five. This is another one of those where technically every single answer could technically answer the question, except the question specifically says which of these would best describe this installation. That's the way you go about doing that. Let's see how we did with your associates installing FOSS. Well, 41% of you said all media used for this project will be managed through software. This is one of those where we went A, B, C, D, E as the answers. 41% said A. 30% said B, the software has specific limitations on how it can be used. 12% said the software is licensed on a per-seat basis. 12% said this quarter's budget for the project has been cut. And 4% have said the software includes the storage of PII, and people are correctly putting into the chat room, what in the world is FOSS? What are you talking about? That is probably the important part of this particular question, which is you have to know what these terms are so that you can then apply them to how they are being used. So let's talk about FOSS and what it really is. And there's a section in your 220-902 exam where you are really working through what these different licensing and EULA type pieces are associated with. So that's one where FOSS is free and open source software. Free and open source software. The source code is available. The user can compile it. And not all open source software is free, but FOSS means that it is also free. That's the F in FOSS. Open source can be, of course, not free, but if it's specified as FOSS, that is indeed free software. It's pretty important to have that available. So our question was specifically about how this particular software is being installed. One of your associates is installing FOSS for an important project. Which of these best describes this installation? Well, we know FOSS. The only thing we know about this is it's free and it's open source. Well, none of the answers here really talked about us being able to see the source code or being able to compile it ourselves. So the open source software part of this particular question doesn't really apply to any of the answers. But the F part, the F part is the free part, really does apply to one of these particular answers. And if you answered D, this quarter's budget for the project has been cut, which, by the way, Happens a lot. You're going along with a project and suddenly, oh yeah, well, turns out last quarter's sales weren't as good as we thought. We've already fired half the people in your project group and we've pulled the money. But you still have to get it done. Please have it done by the end of the quarter. Thanks. So yes, that's people in the chat room going, well, that's sarcasm. That's reality. That's exactly what happens in these projects. Suddenly, the only choice you have available is you can absolutely need to finish this project, but you don't have any money to finish it with. We're not going to give you any cash. You don't have any way to buy anything. You're going to need to scrap together machines that are in the back room. You need to think very creatively about where to get hardware, where to carve off a VM, where to find more information on this. That is the best answer for this, is that the budget has been cut. Let's go through the different answers, though. So some of you are saying, what about these others? Well, A was all media used in this project will be managed through software. Not all free and open source software has media that is managed through software. Some of it you just install it and there's no management whatsoever. So that's not the best description of FOSS. B was that the software has specific limitations on how it can be used. Well, some FOSS software does have specific limitations how it can be used. Some doesn't. In fact, most of it is very open because it's open source software to begin with. So they say you can use this for personal use, you can use it for commercial use, you can use it for government use, you can use it however you'd like. And so that one doesn't apply either. C, the software is licensed on a per seat basis. Well, it's free. There's really no licensing on a per seat basis. So that doesn't help either. And E was the software includes the storage of personally identifiable information, PII. So we also have to know what PII is to be able to answer this particular question. And this particular software could include the storage of PII, but it also may not include the storage of PII. Just because there's PII involved or not doesn't have anything to do with FOSS. So would not be the right answer either. It would be D, this quarter's budget for the project has been cut. And I mean, the folks in the chat room are going, doesn't sound right. That sounds like something out of a crazy story of business. That, my friends, is the normal story of business. This happens more often than you might think, which is why I absolutely made this question to be very accurate as to what in the world is going on out there. You will be faced with challenges dealing with budget and dollars and trying to find resources all the time. So hopefully that's something you'll run into. All these questions today, all of my videos, everything you'll find comes directly from the CompTIA exam objectives. There's somebody, in fact, on Reddit yesterday that said, I went through all of Professor Messer's videos and I took the exam and only a little bit of what I saw in his videos ended up in the exam. Well, that's right. That's how it works. In fact, if you took the exam again, it'd be a completely different group of questions, by the way. Everything, though, from all of my videos, everything that you see in these study groups, everything that you see in my books, they all come directly from these exam objectives. I don't go outside the scope of the objectives, and I cover every single one of the objectives to the letter. And CompTIA does as well. Their exams stay extremely close to what you're going to find in these objectives. If you know every single one of these objectives, I'm clapping now like we're tweeting. If you know every single one of these objectives, you're going to do fine on the exam. You will be great on your exam because they pull directly from this. If you don't have these, stop everything with your studies, go to Google, download CompTIA exam objectives. You can also go to professormesser.com/objectives. So that would be the best way to do this, is to go exactly to those objectives and do it. The best way to go about doing that. Well, we've gone through an hour of Q&A. Can you believe it? I can. Actually, I believe it completely. It was an hour of Q&A because I'm looking at the clock. I know it was an hour, but we do one of these every month. You can always join us again on June the 13th for another A+ study group, or find out when the next study group is. ProfessorMesser.com/calendar will take you to the next study group. Stick around, though. We've got another hour of just open phone lines, questions, answers. You can ask anything you'd like. It can be about A+, it can be about certifications, it can be about life in general. I don't care. Will I answer it? I don't know. We'll find out in the next hour. Stick around for that. We'll talk about that. Next week, by the way, is my Network Plus. The week after that, Security Plus. You'll notice, by the way, this study group for next month for June is not the first Wednesday of the month. We're skipping the first Wednesday of the month, and I'm going to the 13th, 20th, and 27th. We're going to do the same thing in July because July 4th holiday here in the United States. So if you ever want to know, though, if this is well past June the 13th, you're watching this on a replay, just go to professormesser.com/calendar. You'll be able to know exactly what's there and what's available. May help you as well. Find all of those different pieces that are there. See what you know about it. And then, indeed, we're done with the first hour. I can't believe it. If you want to follow us every day for a new question from the A+ exam, professormesser.com/Twitter. Of course, as I mentioned, I just added 101 Network Plus videos to YouTube. You can find all of them at professormesser.com/YouTube. And you can go there and subscribe. When you subscribe, it does help quite a bit. Thank you so much for everyone who has subscribed. You're welcome to also click that bell so you get notifications as well. Don't forget about my A+ course notes, professormesser.com/A+CN. Comes useful. Of course, the Pop Quiz Collection. I have books available for the 22901 and the 22902. It's the same link. professormesser.com/PQC, Pop Quiz Collection. My thanks again to GTS Learning. Make sure you get their special pricing at professormesser.com/Live Labs. And of course, follow me on the calendar, professormesser.com/calendar, to find out when the next live event is going to be. And of course, stick around for the next hour. We'll open up the phone lines. We got Q&A. I want to thank you for joining me on this hour, though. It's been fantastic. Thanks for your questions. Thanks for your answers. Thank you, chat room. We got more to come. Stick around for the next hour, and we will see you again on the A+ study group. Yes, indeed, that is how it is on the exam. Why am I asking all these questions with acronyms in them? Because that's how they do it on the exam. They absolutely they try to make it multiple steps to get through an answer. They're never asking, what does the abbreviation FOSS stand for? You will never get a question like that. They are never going to give you that. Let me get the phone lines up and running, and we will open the phone lines. You can also ask questions live at professormesser.com/live. There's the room there that you can use to ask questions. I'm watching the questions go by. We have no idea what the weight of any questions are on the exam, performance-based or otherwise. There's just no way to know. They don't tell you. They just don't tell you to have that there. Am I ever going to make CCNA videos? I'd love to make some Cisco videos eventually at some point. That'd be nice. It's not currently on the list of things, but hopefully we'll be able to get there someday. I think it'd be fun. That'd be a good group to have. Let me start up my phone lines, and I'll give you the number you can use to call in, because I first have to call in myself. Can I call in on this? How do you call on the phone live with voice? How does that work? I know. Yes. So I got to click here. I got to enter a show number. What show number is this? Is it this number? And then I hit a pound sign, and then what happens?
Your 6-digit PIN number.
Well, that's redundant. Let's do that. And this one, and you click another one, and hopefully the lady says, welcome host. It says I'm in the host room. But am I? Am I really in the host room? I don't see myself up in the host room yet. So we'll get there in a moment. Yes, I am. That works very nice. So if you would like to call in, I need to change some of these things on my screen so we can see that. If you'd like to call in, here we go. You can anywhere toll free in the continental United States. The number is 855-785-7545. That's 855-785-RJ45. If you're on Skype, you can call in for free on Skype. Just put a +1 at the beginning. So anywhere in the world, you can call in for free. There's no Skype minutes required. +1 855-785-7545. Hopefully you're able to read it on the screen better than I'm able to say it. +1 855-785-7545. And it'll be connected, and we've got people calling in, and the numbers are cranking up there. It's one of those where we just need to go to the phone lines immediately. Let's go to the phones. We have the 937 area code. Are you there, caller? What's your name?
My name's Garrett.
Hey, Garrett. Thanks for calling. What's your question today?
Well, I obtained my CompTIA certification several years ago, and I'm up for renewal in a couple of years in 2020. And let's see, I first took some training courses, but I was thinking about doing that, not taking the exam, but what is it, that 4 to 6 hour training program? Is there a test after that, or is it just a class you sit down?
Yeah, that sounds appealing, doesn't it? That has some advantages to it. This is sort of a newer thing they're doing as well. This is on the CompTIA website, on their renewal section. For those of you watching along, I'm going to bring that up so we can see the details of it. There are options available for they say choose your renewal path. And this newer thing that they have is renew with a single activity. And the option underneath that is complete the CompTIA CertMaster CE. That's what it's called, CertMaster CE. There's different CertMasters, so don't get confused over the terminology that they use. There is a CertMaster CE for A+, for Network Plus, and Security Plus. For A+, it's 4 to 6 hours. You go through this self-paced e-learning course. There is nothing, there's no test you have to take afterwards. They ask you questions as you go along. And you have to get every question right as you go along, but you have unlimited opportunities to get every question right as you go along. So when they say 4 to 6 hours, that's probably about right to have this in here. For the A+, it's $100, and that's it. And then when you finish it, you're now recertified. That's it. You're done. You don't have to pay CEU fees. You don't have to send in any CEUs. You don't have to collect CEUs. You don't have to go to a testing center. You don't have to have people look at you through your camera and watch you as you take a test. None of that, which is why I think most people are probably going to be using this method to do it. And that's it. You pay your $100. You go through this at your own pace. You just have to finish it before your exam becomes expired. That's the important part. You can't start it and then suddenly your exam expires and then you finish it up. You have to finish this before the expiration. But the fact that it's 4 to 6 hours, you can probably do that, right?
Oh, yeah. And how much is it for the Security Plus? Because that's the level I'm at with CompTIA.
Gotcha. The Network Plus is $175, and the Security Plus is also $175, which I think ultimately turns out to be less than having to pay the CEU fees. So I think some people will probably take higher level exams. The ones that don't would probably end up taking the CertMaster CE. I think both are pretty good options.
Sounds good. Then can I skip over like a section if I needed to, or do I have to like sit through the whole thing? Or
I've never stepped through the CertMaster CE completely. I've watched other people and they've told me their experience going through it. So I don't know if it's something you can jump back and forth in and go from one part to another. I just know that CompTIA tells me it can take 4 to 6 hours and you're finished with it. So who knows? Maybe you'll be able to tell me.
Oh, okay. Sounds good. And then the other thing is, with your Network Plus question on Facebook, I didn't see a question. I just saw the answers.
Well, I know if you go to the questions I have on Facebook are the same links that go there. Again, I'll have to look and see the Network Plus. Maybe the question didn't make it into my list there, but as soon as we're done here, I'll have a look at it and see if maybe it didn't get pasted properly. That's completely possible when I'm trying to work through the questions and the answers, and I apologize if that's the case.
Oh, it's all good. I just thought I'd let you know.
Check after this. I'll probably later this afternoon. If I mess it up, I'll retweet it out so people can see that I've fixed my problems if that indeed continues to be an issue.
Okay. Sounds good. Thanks.
I appreciate it. Thank you. Thanks for calling. That's always something nice to do whenever you're trying to figure out your strategy for renewing. Make sure you know what all those different options are. Because I mentioned this CertMaster CE to someone the other day, and they said, I had no idea I could just pay $175, spend a little time learning things that I should know anyway, and then I'm renewed. That was it. That's pretty nice to have that there. Back to the calls. The 786 area code. Are you there, caller? What's your name?
Hi, how's it going, Professor? My name is Hassan. I'm calling from LA.
Thanks for calling. What question we have?
So my question is a little off CompTIA. So I found this online university. It's called WGU.
Sure.
Do you happen to know anything about that?
I'm familiar. I'm not involved with WGU, but I'm pretty familiar with what they have going on. Yeah.
So they have a cybersecurity and information assurance bachelor's program. If you take a look, and from your experience, do you think that it's something that is what the market demands right now?
They've taken a different approach. Now, WGU, Western Governors University, is what this is. It is a mix of different state-run universities. So this is not a for-profit type scenario that you may have seen in other places. This is state university systems that have gotten together and put together this set of degrees that you can take completely online, 100% online. And their approach is one that I'm liking. I'm not at all familiar with WGU. I know nothing really of their organization internally, what they do, but I've seen their list of degrees and I've looked through what it takes to earn some of these degrees, and they're focused very much on learning the content and then passing the certification that shows that you've learned this content, which not only means that you are able to get through the course, but now you have a certification when you're done with it. I like that approach a lot. I've mentioned in other study groups that I have my children themselves some are in college, some will be going to college soon, and some of them are really interested in doing things in information technology. But if you look at some of the traditional universities and how they approach IT, they think IT, for some reason, is a lot of programming, and then there's a class on personnel management, which has none of this has anything to do with IT. It has a lot to do with computer science. And I think a lot of universities, all they know is computer science and programming, and they think that's what should happen. But computer science and programming is a very small, relatively small part of information technology. The IT side has server administration, workstation administration, network administration, security. You've got data centers. You've got databases. You've got an enormous grouping of things that you need to know how to do with technology that no traditional university yet has really proven to me that they know what the students really should be learning. But organizations like WGU, they get it. They're like, okay, you need to know networking. You need to know security. You need to know how to use Windows. You need to know how to use Linux. You need to know how to use Mac OS, because when you are put into these IT organizations, you don't really need to know anything about modern history. You don't really need to know anything about calculus. You don't need to understand, actually some things you do need to know are how to write well, how to communicate well. Though I think those are good for almost any job you go into. But a lot of these other things you learn, I went through chemistry. I went through cost accounting classes. I went these things that really didn't have much to do with IT. So I like the approach.
That was the only reason why I looked. Yeah, that was the only reason why, because in a previous study group you mentioned this, that regular state colleges, their approach to IT is very broad. Like, they're teaching calculus and all these courses that you don't really need. And then WGU is really focused on, you do have English composition where you know what you have to write, and then you have algebra. But after that, it's mostly networking and security and servers. So is it something that you would recommend? Because, working full-time and stuff, it's really hard to actually go to a state school. It's finding the right classes at the right time.
Yeah. Some state universities are starting to get it, but the approach that WGU has really they've been doing this for years now. So they've really understood. And if you talk to somebody who's been in IT, I have been in a corporate help desk. I have been remote troubleshooting and installations, so the remote tech guy that goes from place to place. I have been on the systems engineering side with software sales. I've been on systems engineering with next generation firewall. I've done implementations and professional services with those things. I've worked with IT departments and been in some of the largest networks in the world. And the things that WGU are teaching are the things you need to know. You need to understand the math that you need to be able to do some of these networking and security things that we do. You need to know the English so you can communicate with people properly. And then you need to have a strong foundation in the technology. I think if all of our universities sort of went to that approach, there would be a lot more skilled IT professionals in the world today. I think a lot of schools approach IT as some type of very broad knowledge that you would need. And as I mentioned, as you just mentioned, that's not the case. If anything, IT is more vocational. It's kind of a bad, people have considered that to be a bad word through the years, but IT really is a very vocational, except it's a high-tech vocation. But you need to understand all of those things we just mentioned to be able to survive inside of the data center. Nobody's really going to be asking you about Greek architecture when you're trying to get the server back up and running. That's just the reality. Is it nice to know Greek architecture? Yes, you should be well-rounded, but probably IT is not the place to do it.
Right. In terms of being accredited, the school is accredited, and does that hold any weight?
I know there are different accreditations for universities. I think that the accreditation that WGU has is one specific to online learning and the things that they're doing. I think any type of third-party accreditation is usually helpful when you're looking at organizations like this. For my kids, some of them had looked at WGU. One of my kids is in an IT program right now at Barry University. There is a traditional university that actually gets it, that they teach IT and they teach the technology along with the math you need and the English and the communication skills that you need. My daughter, who's learning IT, just finished a class on speech where you are communicating with people. And I thought that's fantastic because that's one of the biggest challenges we have as human beings. Other schools like WGU, good example of that. And there are some other schools. There's another one in Florida that some of my other kids are looking at. They're thinking this might be a good one to go to because they focus on cloud-based technologies. They focus on understanding how to do graphics for the gaming systems. They're able to understand how to implement networks and put them together and work with operating systems. Those are incredible skills that for some reason, big universities, they're traditionally have not been able to make that happen. The ones that are pretty innovative, and it's pretty impressive to see. Definitely look at accreditations and what the different ones are and what those universities or schools have. I generally don't tell people, or I generally tell people, you may want to avoid for-profit, but there are some very good for-profit universities that do this type of thing as well. So it really just depends on your geography and what's available to you.
Okay, sweet. Yeah, that was my only question. I just wanted to ask somebody that was in the profession to tell me if WGU was a good choice.
WGU, they've got a very popular and well-attended subreddit on Reddit.com, and they also have a very good setup on which one of these on Slack. They have a very good Slack. There's links to the Slack in the WGU subreddit. It's very busy. There's lots of communication going on, and you can ask questions, and there are people that are currently students. They'll tell you.
Okay, sweet. Thank you so much.
Thanks for calling. That's something. I keep hitting this. Sorry, I keep hitting that mic today. That's something that's a challenge, I think, whenever you start trying to figure out, what do I do next? Where do I go next with this thing? How are we figuring out what to do with all of these? And we're in this kind of conversion. We're in this changeover from traditional university to give me what I need to know to work in IT, which is not traditional. I think organizations are trying to figure out. Back to the phones you've been holding for so long. The 719 area code. Are you there, caller? What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hi, Professor Messer. My name is Daniel. I'm calling from Colorado Springs, Colorado.
Excellent. Welcome, Daniel. What can we do for you today?
Hey, thanks. So called, I don't know, it's been a few weeks ago now. Anyway, I mentioned that I was prepping for my Network Plus. Calling today to say I took the exam on Saturday, and I crushed it.
Nice.
But yeah, and to be honest with you, I used pretty much just your materials to do that. So, yeah, really just want to say thank you for for offering such great content. It is relevant. It does matter. It did help.
That's fantastic.
So thank you for that.
Congratulations there. Without giving away, because obviously when you take the exam, you sign a non-disclosure that says you're not going to talk about what you saw on the exam. But if you had to give somebody a couple of tips, the things you should study, things that you should really focus on when you're walking into these exams, does anything in particular come to mind?
So, yeah, I'll try to be as general as possible, indeed, because of that candidate agreement. So I utilized two of the strategies that you've specifically mentioned, one being just move right past the performance-based questions, the simulations. I did that. And then I also, when I got in and sat down, the first thing I did was wrote out the 7-second subnetting table. And it was useful. I did have some questions where it was useful.
Great.
The other thing is, it took me probably, even after skipping over the stems, it took me about 10 or 15 questions to kind of get into the head of the person or people who were writing the questions.
Right. That's a good way to put it. That's a nice way to put it.
Yeah. I did a lot of flagging, like those first 15, 20 questions, but I was glad that I did. I was also thankful that I could come back because I finished all of the questions with about a half hour to spare. So then I was able to go back.
Excellent.
And walk back through a couple of those questions. And I actually did find some things where I was like, whoa, wait a minute. No, that's not what they were asking at all. And be able to change my answer. So yeah, I'd say the questions, the study questions that you provide for in the study groups and the ones that are on the website, they were helpful because, as you've said many times, they're not going to just say like, define acronym XYZ,
right?
Or what is the definition of XYZ? They're going to expect that you have an understanding of how XYZ works. So anyway, I do have a question. I'm finished with Network Plus. Concurrently, I'd started a training program for Security Plus.
Wow.
Yeah, Network Plus is the only certification that I hold right now, and I'm debating about whether to go back and get A Plus before the end of the year or not. I should have security. Well, the training program for Security Plus ends in July. So, theoretically, I could have all three of those sort of foundational certifications from CompTIA before the end of the year, which I'm feeling really good about. Having said that, and now that I've seen one of the exams, I'm getting, if you'll forgive the term, I'm getting a little bit of certification lust, where I'm like, oh, well, I could just get hundreds of these.
That's
this
right.
is fun.
Sure.
Why not? But I also recognize that I would like to kind of target my journey a little bit instead of just getting one of everything. I think not only would that be beneficial for me personally, but I think it would be beneficial from a resume standpoint too. Like, hey, this was my directed focus, and that's how I got here. Anyway, all that being backstory. So I'm looking at doing a couple of different things. One is I thought immediately to get my CCNA because networking information is very fresh right now. And I suspect, I've not looked at CCNA material in depth enough to be to really be able to say this for sure, but I suspect that a lot of the sort of overarching networking ideas that I was studying for Network Plus will carry over perfectly to CCNA. And that the majority of what I would need to learn is like, okay, so now how do I actually configure these things?
That's pretty good description. Yes.
Okay. All right. So having said that, the course material for Security Plus is actually really, really interesting. And it's kind of capturing a bit of my imagination. So I was thinking maybe I should just not worry about A Plus or CCNA right now and just pursue that angle, which I'm, kind of debating. My question for you is, and forgive me for taking hours to get to it. My question for you is, how can I put this? If like how much do I care about having a CASP, the CompTIA sort of advanced level security related certification versus getting a foundational CISSP. What is it? The SCCP or something like that. I've forgotten.
Right.
Like their sort of first one. I know that they require some, like, hey, you can't even test for the CISSP unless you've been in the field for like 3 or 5 years in one of the domains.
Right.
But I think that they'll still let you pass and give you kind of a provisional certification that basically states, okay, you've got this, but you have to get the real world experience in order to sort of validate it down the road. Anyway, if it were between those two, which would you say would be most relevant in, the current marketplace?
For the longest time, and the CISSP has been around for so long that it's one that most security professionals are very familiar with, and they consider that to be a pretty strong certification. But I think you're almost at the point where you almost need to take a step back and figure out where you want to go with this. Where should I be focusing these efforts? What do I want to do next? Do I want to manage a network? Do I want to get into a security team? Do I want to start at a help desk? And sometimes you start at a help desk. You don't have a choice in some organizations. Some organizations will hire entry-level networking, depending on how big the organization is. Some organizations, it's more rare, but they have entry-level security. That's not a very common scenario, though. You almost never start in security in these organizations. So you almost need to get more intel about what's in your local area or the area where you'd like to work. Find out what the jobs and postings available are. Go to all the online sites. Find out what your local companies in your area are hiring for. Find out what they're asking for. Some organizations don't want you to have certifications, so they can hire you at a smaller salary and then teach you as you go. Some organizations don't have time for that. They want to hire somebody who's knowledgeable, and they're looking for certification. So the certification is a means to this end. It's not the end. It's not the beginning either. It's really something that helps you pepper your personality and your knowledge and your experiences to be able to walk into a door and show people that you really do know what you're talking about. So it's almost a point from what I'm hearing, because you've got a lot going on there, the networking, the security. Those are two very different worlds, although security does indeed build quite a bit on the networking part of it. There's a huge foundation of networking in IT security. So that's why I mentioned maybe figure out what your next step is. A lot of times, I think I mentioned this in the last study group, a lot of times people ask, where do you see yourself in 5 years? Or where do you see yourself in 10 years? Like, brother, I'm just trying to figure out what the next step is. I have no idea. The entire world of IT is going to be different in 10 years. Let's not even think about that part yet. I'm just trying to figure out what the next step is going to be. And right now, the next thing I want to be able to do is be on a help desk doing this so I can work there. And then I want to move into networking so I can do this. And then maybe after that, move into security. There needs to be a path in your mind of where you'd like to start and where you might go from there. But of course, because of the way things change in this industry, who knows what's going to be different in 10 years? There may be an entire new different type of networking that we're doing. There may be completely different types of applications that are suddenly taking the world by storm. And now suddenly you're now automatically moving in that direction that you would have never known before. But you have to have the fundamentals so you're able to do that. So try to figure out what you want to do next. Find out as much information as you can about that. And if you are in an area where you have the ability to start meeting some of these professionals at Microsoft user groups, Cisco user groups, almost every large geography has at least one or both of those. And of course, there's VMware user groups. There are security user groups. ISSA is a good example of those. Find those groups and go meet those people, because they're really going to tell you, and ask them, hey, I'm studying this stuff right now. If you were me, what should I be doing to get a job in your organization? And they'll tell you, oh, you need to do this, you need to do this, you need to do this, and give me your resume and let's connect on LinkedIn. Let's keep in touch and figure out what's going on, because it's hard to find good people.
I see. Thanks. Yeah. If I'm understanding correctly, maybe I should, if I'm understanding your suggestion correctly, it sounds like it might be time to pump the brakes and maybe think about what job I can get or what job I want to get with the knowledge that I have right now, and, make that more the focus instead of, my newfound certification lust, and just like getting everything and seeing what happens.
The certifications will come. You will have plenty of opportunity in your IT career to start building the certification. But if you don't have any practical IT experience and you walk into the room with your A+, Network+, Security+, and a provisional CISSP, people are going to look at you and go, wait a second, don't you? You need to do something first. It's all a layering, and it's all you have to have sort of a smattering of practical experience, some stories that you've worked on, maybe a home lab you've set up, some relationships that you've built in the industry, and then finally some certifications that you can pepper in with all of that.
That makes perfect sense. Thanks, as always. Thanks very much for your perspective. And once again, thanks for your help on getting me certified.
You're going the right direction, Daniel. Best of luck.
Thanks. Bye.
That's something that's always a challenge, is figuring out where should I go. Just figure out the next step. Don't worry so much about the big picture right now. Just figure out what you want to do next. The last place I stayed at almost 7 years, 6.5 years. Before that, I stayed at a place about 5 years. That's a really long time in our industry to stay in any one organization. And all I really was trying to do is, what do I do next? Because then once you get next, you can stay there 5 years or 7 years. And that's a long time in our industry to figure out those pieces. Back to the phones. The 773 area code. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Joe, calling from Chicago.
Joe, you held forever. I'm so sorry. Thanks for holding, though. What can we do for you?
My pleasure. Thank you. It was a pleasure listening to your videos and your classes. Professor, I need to know, how do you write a driver software for a peripheral? I have a good peripheral in mind that it's very, very helpful. It's very practical, saves companies a lot of money, but I just don't know how to write the driver for it so that it could talk to the operating system. Do you have any information on that?
I have never written a driver in my life. It is something that requires a skill in obviously programming, computer science, especially understanding things at a very detailed level with communication to a particular device. It does require some very specialized skills in doing that. It's not like building an app for a mobile device. You're getting into the very detailed communication between an operating system and a piece of hardware that's connecting into that operating system. I have not done any of that, nor have I had any interest, because I would be horrible at writing device drivers. But there are a number of people that have. If I had to figure it out today, I would probably go out and try to find some people that have written device drivers for Linux. There are probably quite a few on the internet, because Linux is almost all volunteered people writing their own device drivers because nobody else is going to unless they do. For Windows, the people writing the device drivers are usually the people that are creating the hardware itself. So the people at HP or the people at Microsoft or the people at Logitech probably aren't going to tell you a lot about how that works. And I would bet, I don't know because I'm not really on the computer science side, but I would bet there's got to be some good books out there about writing your own device drivers and making that happen. And if you've got some type of hardware that does not have a device driver and people desperately need it for an operating system, you'd be a pretty popular fellow if you were able to make that device driver work.
Yes, sir. And otherwise, if I could not get enough resources to be able to develop the driver, is it possible to present it to some companies which do peripheral? They manufacture these devices. Would that you think they would be any interested in that? Are they interested in this kind of idea?
Sometimes if you have a piece of hardware that has been created and there's just no device driver for it yet, maybe there's device drivers for other operating systems, you can sometimes present that to a company, but very often they've already considered that they weren't going to create a driver for that particular operating system because they weren't going to support it, or they weren't interested in bringing people in that had the knowledge to be able to make that happen, because Windows works very different than Linux, which works very different than Mac OS. So companies have to make decisions about where they're going to spend the money building out the software, especially if they're a company that makes hardware. They aren't really a software company. So, but you still need that software driver to be able to make that piece of it work. I found that often in dealing with audio equipment or musical equipment, that the people that make audio equipment are very good at making audio equipment, and the people making musical equipment are very good at making musical equipment, but not really so good at creating device drivers. They are a little buggy in the way they work. You have to really look around and try to find the right ones for it. Sometimes those companies will work with you. More often than not, they will not. And that's why I mentioned on Linux, people with the Linux will go out and build device drivers without any type of help from the hardware manufacturer. They'll figure it out and they'll write it just so they're able to access that hardware in a Linux operating system. And I find that intriguing, and it may be a good source of knowledge.
Yes, thank you very much. Also, it's possible to use what they call it generic device drivers. Is there such a thing as generic?
In some cases, there can be. With certain equipment, especially with things like printers, there are some generic device drivers, because some printers work using very generic print driver languages. So, for instance, a PCL is a very generic print driver language. And if this third-party device can speak PCL, you could use a generic PCL driver to print to that printer. You may not be able to do some fancy things on that printer, like use different types of fonts or be able to access different trays on the paper trays, but it would at least be able to print things. But when you get into more specialized hardware, you'll find there aren't really generic drivers available.
Yes. Okay, Professor. Thank you very kindly for your information. Thank you for your time. And I hope to see you in next class.
Thank you, Joe. Much, I appreciate you calling. That's quite a challenge. So I wish you the best of luck being able to come up with a driver for different operating systems. I've had to support older hardware before, and we've had newer operating systems. So how do you get the company to give you a driver for this newer operating system? The company may not even be around anymore. How do you make that hardware work with the new? Sometimes you can use older drivers. You can tweak the operating system. You can copy the sys files in. There's things you can sometimes work around. Maybe you can find some way to do that. Back to the phones, 954 area code. Are you there, caller? What's your name? Where are you calling from?
How you doing, Professor Messer? My name is Kevin. I'm calling from Pembroke Pines, Florida.
Oh, Kevin. I used to live in Pembroke Pines, Kevin. Welcome. What can we do for you?
I have a security question. I want to ask you about password salt and pepper.
Okay.
I understand the concept behind salt, but how practical is pepper? Like will a website actually use pepper? I know you just cycle through the string of characters. I just is that really like a practical thing? Do you for to do that?
Well, one of the things that salt and pepper basically perform a similar function, but one of the things whenever you see salt being password being with the salt's usually included. So you're able to have access to both the hashed password and the salt. So if you do the algorithm, you could figure out what the actual password is, or at least be able to have an easier time of reverse engineering that password. When you get into something like Pepper, it's usually stored separately. So you don't usually, if somebody's found your list of hashed passwords, they don't usually have the Pepper. So they would have to find where you're storing the pepper. Usually they wouldn't have access to it. That's the whole idea behind that, is to add additional security to it and have some of those. There's some other things specific to pepper, but that's the primary difference between those two and having that there. Companies use those techniques all the time. In fact, I wish more companies would use those techniques in being able to store this information, because you're seeing constantly large database attacks where they're grabbing all of the hashed passwords, and you're finding that either the hashed passwords have not even been salted, or they have the salt and they have the algorithm to be able to reverse engineer, and they end up being able to reverse engineer 90% of the passwords they're finding. If they had used pepper and put the pepper somewhere else, they would have been a much better case for them not being able to churn through all of those passwords so much faster. It's remarkable the lack of security some of these companies use with our passwords.
Yeah, I know SALT is about trying to eliminate rainbow tables. I just thought like Pepper was more about trying to prolong a brute force attack if somebody tried to perform that on a website.
Well, the SALT is also a case where somebody is trying to extend the brute force attack as well. The whole problem you have with SALT is that somebody first has access to the SALT, and secondly, they know the algorithm that was used to create the hash by using the SALT. But in many cases, the bad guys that grab a salted set of hashes, they don't have the algorithm that was used. All they have is a salt, which really doesn't help them very much. So both of them are very good at protecting our passwords. Pepper is just a little better because the peppered information is stored somewhere externally to the value that's being hashed. It's maybe part of the application, and the bad guy has no idea what the pepper happens to be. But you're right, though.
Oh, okay.
You're right in that it should be more difficult to figure out or run a brute force, or you obviously can't do rainbow tables for really a salt or a pepper, but you certainly would not be able to it should be more difficult to do a brute force attack against a hash that is pepper, because you have no idea where that pepper happens to be or what that pepper value happens to be. But with salt, you at least would know what the salt value is because it's usually stored with the password, but you might still not know what the algorithm is. So it may be just as valuable as pepper. It just depends on the scenario.
Yeah. And also, this is an engineer question. From your knowledge or whatever, what's the reason why Moore's Law came to an end? Is it because of transistors, or is it because of heating issues? I'm trying to figure out why is Intel having hard problems shrinking their dies to 10 nanometer.
Yeah, the delay on the 10 nanometer was a pretty. Have we hit it? Have we finally ended the time of Moore's Law, where we're doubling the size of these transistors in the CPUs in every interval? Well, maybe we have. Maybe we finally hit it. Moore's Law was sort of a guess anyway. There was really no scientific.
Yeah, no science. Yeah,
it was a guess, or it was an estimate on how things would go. I think the estimate is still pretty close, though. We're still doubling every X amount of time, but obviously it's becoming much more difficult on the heat side. We're seeing heat problems for the last 10 years with these processors that we've had, and cramming all of those transistors in such a small place. And now we're sort of hitting the limits of what we can do with physics. We're getting down to such small areas, and the 10 nanometers is a good example, where now it's so difficult to build that. We have to build new technologies to keep up with that piece, and we may be hitting a physics issue. Well, I can't wait to see what comes out when they finally do get these latest set of chips out. Then what happens? We very well could be hitting the end of that one.
Yeah, I thought it was like thermodynamics, because all the density of those transistors together. So I just want to make sure, was it that, or was it an actual fabrication of the transistor? So
in my case, I try not to deal with too much of how it's made, and I want to know if they're going to be able to make it and have it get to a point where we can do more things with these technologies. It's an interesting physics problem. I follow a couple of different hardware podcasts to try where they talk about here's what's going on with the processors and here's what Intel's running through. But I'm just not knowledgeable enough in the physics around creating the CPU to know if they're really going to be able to get over it or not. I'm more of a spectator now and saying, well, let's see how this goes.
Yeah. Yeah. And my last question is why are there so many abbreviations and acronyms in IT?
Oh, if you knew the answer to that one and I knew the answer to that one, we would both be much better placed to know these. They send me notes all the time. I'm going through Network Plus, and what in the world have you people done by creating so many acronyms? It's true. It's monstrous. We're so good at it. I don't know whether it's something that we got from the government. Maybe that's what we wanted to do, but you're right. It's massive, the number of acronyms, but it does get to a point. I will tell you that it does get to a point in your day-to-day where it becomes normal. It becomes, you know what people are talking about. It's not a foreign language. It's something you're become accustomed to, and it becomes your second language. It's just a little bit challenging to get it from the beginning, isn't it?
Yeah, because when I took the Network Plus exam, it mentioned about PDU, and I was trying to figure out what it's talking about, protocol data unit or power distribution unit.
Right.
I didn't try to figure that one out.
And that's not the only place where you're going to run into problems with ECC. Are you talking about memory, or are you talking about cryptography? It happens all the time.
Yeah, the STP, or the shield, twisted pair, or spanning tree protocols. I was like, it's kind of confusing sometimes, but I'm getting the hang of it.
It'll come easier as time goes on, I promise.
All right, so thank you for your time.
Thank you, Kevin. I appreciate the call.
All right.
I miss the days in Pembroke Pines, and I lived in Silver Lakes. Out on 183rd Avenue. There you go. That was where I was. Let's go to the phones. The 502 area code. You've been holding so long. Thanks so much, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
My name is Roger. I'm calling from Southern California.
Roger, we held you there too long. I'm sorry about that, but thank you for holding on. What can we do for you?
No problem. Basically, my first question is how much time do I have left to take the 901 before it becomes the 1001 or whatever they're going to
whatever it's going to be
next?
Well, we know that the 900 series was released in December of 2015. So if we look at the 3-year cycle that CompTIA usually does, we would probably see the next set of exams released in the December timeframe this year. So that's, we're in May right now. Okay. So you got plenty of time. And usually after they release those exams, they still keep the current exams around for another 6 months. So at this time next year, you'll probably still be able to take the 900 series exams.
Okay. I'm having a little bit more trouble with 901 related stuff than I did with 902.
I had the same problem. I did, because I know Windows really well. I've followed Windows through the years, and then I didn't really do a lot with hardware through the years. So it ends up when I finally look at these exams, I understand the Windows stuff. I got to understand all this hardware things. It was difficult for me. I think other people are the reverse. They've worked with hardware a while, and they haven't really worked with Windows. It just depends on who you talk to.
Right. I'm able to take my laptop apart and put it back together. In fact, I pretty much rebuilt it.
On a laptop, that's pretty impressive.
It's a Dell 3521. I put a new motherboard with discrete graphics on it.
And one of the advantages you have with Dell is they really do give you nice documentation to be able to do that.
Well, actually, it's one simple word that describes my technique. YouTube.
that helps too. I use iFixit. That's my special word.
Yeah. Anything that has a step-by-step instructional video as to how to. I did the same thing to my ex-wife's laptop. She had a Lenovo, and I maxed out the RAM and I put a 1 terabyte hybrid drive in it.
Nice.
And it's just like performing out the wazoo.
It's almost required for laptops. Every laptop is so different. The way you take them apart is so intricate. You almost have to have some type of third-party documentation because you'll never be able to figure this out on your own.
So as a tech, if I'm working like for, let's say, Fry's or Geek Squad at the Best Buys, they won't hold it against me if I go referring back to manuals for techs to tell us how to pull it apart and stuff.
Oh, absolutely not. Although what you'll tend to find in some of those types of environments is they don't spend a lot of time troubleshooting the laptops because they are so intricate, they are so time consuming to be able to work with, that they will ship them off to a clearinghouse that is full of people that really specialized in that laptop that doesn't have to refer back. They'll just take it all apart and do whatever it needs to do and ship it back. But for larger systems, the desktop type systems that you can fix on site, they tend to get into the middle of those. And usually they're dealing with a lot of operating system problems also. And those obviously they can do in-house too.
Right. Another thing is like, okay, I get calls from people claiming to be from Microsoft.
Yes.
And they say, go to Event Viewer and see all the errors that are in your operating system.
Right.
You need to download our proprietary software, which is antivirus. But I just want to make it clear, it's true that Windows Defender is by far the best.
It's true.
Security you can have, right? Compared to like Trend Micro. They used to make PC Zone.
It's
Internet security.
People don't realize there's an extremely good antivirus and anti-malware built into Windows with Windows Defender.
So there's no need to go out and fork out additional $100 to buy a proprietary internet security system, and especially if you're running Windows 10 or Windows 7 and up, it'll conflict with Windows Defender, right?
Almost always. And to be clear, Microsoft isn't calling anybody. Someone who's calling you and telling you that they're Microsoft is not Microsoft. That is completely a scam to get money out of you. You should never give somebody a credit card, and they will never call you directly and tell you there's a problem. And guess what? Everybody's event manager or event viewer has tons of errors inside of it. That's just the normal operating system. That's the same in Windows, in Mac OS, and in Linux. If you were to look at the internal errors that are going back, there's plenty of messages in the error log. Most of them are completely benign, and don't believe a word of it.
Yeah. Does the Exam Compass website have adequate coverage in terms of practice questions for the 901?
I don't know. I have not spent a lot of time on that site looking at. A lot of people love their questions. A lot of people have told me their questions are outside the scope. Some of their questions are outside the scope of the exam objectives. Other people said they're really hard questions. So if you know those questions, you should do good on the exam. I've just never spent time on the site to know. I probably should.
Okay. All right. And I thank you very much, sir. And I've called you actually before on other live lectures that you've given. So
I appreciate the
your
call.
videos are very impressive. And when I get my A+ certificate, I'll try and email you a copy of it with a thank you card attached.
I'd love to see it. I'm sending you all the luck in the world. Let us know how it goes.
All right. Appreciate it. Thank you. Have a nice day. Bye.
Thank you, sir. Same to you. That's always a challenge, is figuring out the way to do it. And for me, I was the same way. 902 was easier than 901. I don't know why that is. Other people are saying 901, easy to do. Exam, what was the one they were just mentioning on the call for this? I have to find that one. I'll bring it up as we're talking to the folks in the 240 area code. Are you there, caller? What's your name? Where are you calling from? 240 area code. Are you there, caller? What's your name? Where are you calling from? Oh, now we're picking up the phone.
Hello?
Hello. Hi. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
My name is Nieto.
Well, thank you for calling. What question do you have today?
Yes. I'm calling from Maine.
Excellent.
And I've been so excited about your videos because I'm someone who is moving from one profession to another. So I did study real estate, But I know that IT is really challenging for me.
You may want to turn down the
And
volume
one
of
thing-
your stream there in the
Okay.
background. It seems to be coming through just a little bit.
Yes.
So what question do you have? This is, by the way, a very common thing.
Okay.
People moving from one type of environment to another. People who are nurses and truck drivers, there's a good reason to move to IT. So what question do you have?
Yes. So this is my question, because most times when I watch your videos and the 900, because I'm really looking up to taking up the 900 before the year runs out, I feel like I'm grabbing everything, because everything is so new, from the hardware to the tools and to the troubleshooting and everything. But I'm excited because I kind of always have an understanding each time I watch the videos. And just now I'm through with some of the videos. I want to move on to the questions and answers and the hands-on. So it's a procedural step for me at the moment. But this is my question. I'm trying to bridge the knowledge and the hands-on. So I kind of need like an encouragement, like, what do you see? Like, this is like a step of a baby. So sometime when I go out there, I have the knowledge, but to say it, I become very fretful about how to present myself.
Right.
You know, I know, like, I can say this. I know that this is, when I enter a room, I can identify the route, the routers, the hardware. I can identify some things, and this is what I've known. But trying to bring it out, I become like stuck in myself, and I just want you to, like, just give me those procedure theories, because I feel like when I continue, probably I'm going to learn better. But I also want you to encourage me on this aspect.
It's something you sort of deal with all the way through your IT career, because I went through help desk, networking, went into protocol analysis, then into security, and sort of all the way through each one of those steps was being able to identify what you're working with and be able to understand what you're faced with, and then know what to do next. It's always the biggest challenge of anybody who's trying to do these types of jobs. Usually, the things that you're working with, you'll become very familiar with. They'll be very comfortable. So, for example, you're going through the 900 series exams, you're going to be working a lot with Windows. You're going to become very comfortable with working with Windows. You'll be able to understand the boot process. You'll be able to understand what you're seeing in Performance Manager. You'll be able to understand the event viewer and see the messages going through there and become very familiar. And you'll start to have problems that are very common, especially if you were to get a job working at a help desk, which is where I started. You start to see that things happen over and over again. Oh, you had that error? I know it solves that particular problem. And you start building your own knowledge base in your own brain of the types of problems that you run into and where they go from there. It's one of those things that is the experience part of what you're doing with IT and getting into those pieces. And you become very comfortable in that particular piece. And as soon as you're comfortable, then you move on to the next thing. If you're comfortable in Windows, you move on to Linux, or you move on to Mac, or you move on to networking, or you get into databases, or you get into Windows Server. You're always expanding that realm. But one of the things that happens when you do that, you never know everything. You're always in a case where you're always learning. If you're not, then you're not doing something right in this industry. And even when I was working in my last position, working with a security startup, there was constant trying to learn and keep up with the technology, because we had cutting edge security technology that nobody had ever seen before. We created it from scratch. It was brand new in the industry, and it was using a different approach that nobody had ever used. So there was massive amounts of learning involved. And I was at really the top part of my game as far as a security professional was concerned. And I was desperately trying to hang on to the rope that's on the back of the truck that's dragging me down the highway at high rate of speed. It's just a constant learning process. So don't be discouraged that it seems like I'm in situations where I'm uncomfortable with what I'm seeing, because guess what? You're going to be doing that your entire career. It's more of, how do I approach this problem? If I'm not familiar with it now, where do I go next to get more information? You almost become more of a researcher and student of what you're looking at every time so that you can then add on to your existing personal knowledge base and just grow it larger and larger.
Thank you so much. This makes a whole lot of sense because right now I feel like documentation of what I know would give me an edge, and then being with purpose in view. And I want to believe so much strongly that the more I march on, no matter how difficult I feel or the heat, I'll be more comfortable with the knowledge I grab along my road path.
You will, and just keep doing it. Very often I will see in the industry, or I will work with people that have stopped trying to learn the new things, and they're always left behind. And it's one of those situations where if you don't go to math class for a couple of weeks and then you show up, suddenly everything's foreign because they've already covered stuff that you need to know going forward. It's the same way with IT. You always have to keep up with the latest things of what's going on. If you become too comfortable and you never expand that, then you end up moving behind. Everybody leaves you in the dust. So always stay interested, always stay curious, always try to figure things out and keep learning, and you're going to do fine in IT.
Thank you so much. Let me work with this, and I want to believe that I'll continue to be a student, and more as I progress, I will always give you a heads up on my progression in the field. Thank you so much. Your videos are so great because most times when I even watch them, it's like my mind opens about something I'm learning new. My fight now is just to bridge the gap between what I'm learning and how to put it into practice. So I want to step out there and see how I can improve myself, and I'll give you heads up as time goes by.
That's perfect. You're very welcome. Thank you for calling. Let us know how it goes. That's great. And I think that's probably the best approach too. Just keep learning. Just keep being curious. Try to figure out what that is. I will often add new podcasts to my list or new web pages that are going through topics that I don't normally go through, that are talking about pieces of technology and IT that I don't normally touch, just so I can see what's going on over on the hardware side, what's going on with CPUs today. What are we doing with video cards these days? And then I'll come back to, because a lot of what I do deals with software, building videos. There's video technology I have to stay up with. So when do I make the jump to 4K? What equipment's required for that? What type of systems will be required to make that happen? It's a constant move. And you always have to be curious, and you always have to stay up with it, or you have no idea where these things are going to go for those different pieces. Good. I think we still have some lines open if people want to call in. We've also got questions that have ended up in the chat room. I'm going to circle back to kind of catch some of those that were coming in. Oh, by the way, some people earlier were talking about getting hands-on with operating systems. I gave you some options with some live labs during the first part of the study group, but if you go to Modern.ie, MODERN.ie, modern, like the modern day, .ie, which stands, interestingly enough, for Internet Explorer, IE. It redirects you to a Microsoft developer website. And the reason I mention this is that for our A+ exams, we have to know a lot about Windows Vista, Windows 7, and Windows 8.1. Well, Windows Vista is obviously no longer available anywhere, but on this website, they have a tools pull-down menu with virtual machines where they have VMs available for Windows 7, Windows 8.1, and Windows 10, although we don't need Windows 10 for what we're doing with the A+ exam. Fortunately, Windows 7 and Windows Vista are so similar to each other that if you know Windows 7, you probably know everything you need to know about Windows Vista. Those are free virtual machines. They are full-blown Windows systems. You can load them into a virtual machine manager such as VirtualBox. They support a number of different VMs. Let's pick one. Let's pick the Windows 8.1, and I can run in VirtualBox, Vagrant, VMware for Windows and Mac, Hyper-V for Windows, and Parallels for Mac. So you can load that and then download the VM and then run that Windows inside of your existing desktop for free. No cost, no money. You just suddenly have a virtual machine that you can use with all these operating systems, so you can find everything there that you need to be able to make that happen. That's at modern.ie. So that'll redirect you and get you there where you need to be. It's and it's amazingly free. These VMs are only licensed for use in a lab or development environment, which is perfect for us that are trying to figure out the 901, 902 content, because those are lab or development environments. So if you're in that situation where you're trying to get more hands-on, which is always good for the exam, go out to Modern.ie and you can get some free VMs if you don't have access to those operating systems already. Back to the phone lines. Let's go to this next one. Caller, what's your name? Where are you calling from? I can hear me. Let's see if we can hear the caller. Are you there, caller? You may want to turn that stream down. Are you there? Are you calling? What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hello.
Hi. What's your name? Where are you calling from? We're waiting for the stream at this point. You may want to turn that stream down and listen into your Skype or your phone connection. I think you may be calling in on the Skype line, and that may be throwing you off a bit because there is a bit of a delay. There's about a 10-second delay on the stream at a minimum.
Hello, Professor. My name is Hassan. I'm calling from Liverpool, United Kingdom.
Oh, well, welcome. Thank you for calling. What can we do for you today?
Professor, I've been following your broadcast videos for the past 8 years, since 2010.
Yeah.
And I'm now taking my Security Plus before the expiry date, July.
For the 401, that's right, yeah.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, you're going to take the 401 before it expires in July.
Yeah, that's right, yeah. And after that, I'm a bit confused whether to go either server side or network side. I'm currently working in IT and as admin IT in the third line, but I'm kind of confused now where to go from there, whether to proceed to a server side or to proceed to a Cisco side or network side. So I'm just a bit confused. I just need a bit of your advice. I'm just kind of lost on what I'm going by now.
It's a good problem to have, quite honestly, because now you've kind of got the fundamentals. I'm assuming if you're finishing up the Security Plus, then you probably have taken some of the other certifications before. Do you have like networking certifications or experience or A+ type certifications or experience?
Yeah, I do, yeah.
Okay, so now's the point where you get to make a tough decision, which is, what do I want to do next? I was mentioning this earlier, which is you don't have to think about the long term. You just need to figure out what the next thing is going to be, and then we can figure out the rest of the things as we go from there. But since you now have some experience or knowledge in the A+, the Network Plus, and Security Plus, there's probably one of these things that you're finding more interesting. So I usually will recommend to people, if you're finding operating systems interesting, you may want to go down the Linux or the Microsoft road. If you're finding networking interesting, the Cisco content is an exceptionally good place to go. If you're finding security interesting, usually it takes a path through networking to get to security, but that may be a path that you might want to take as well. It's really also dependent on where you happen to be and the jobs that happen to be in your area. And I highly recommend that you go to the local job posting websites, find out what companies are looking for, do a lot of recon on those sites and try to figure out what type of jobs are available and then what they're looking for. Are they looking for security people? Are they looking for networking knowledge? What type of certifications do they want someone to have for that job? And if at all possible, start attending some of your local user group meetings. The Microsoft user group and the Cisco user group are great jumping off points. You get to meet the people who are local. Those are the people that are usually involved in the hiring process. And then you can also learn from them, what should I be doing to work in a job doing what you're doing? And they're more than happy to tell you. Try to figure out those pieces. That might be, before you start making a decision on where you're going, a little more recon may help give you or point you in a direction that makes sense for your particular area.
Yeah. I did back in college CCNA, but that was, and I took the CCNA. I didn't take the exam, but I did the college. But I found interest in the CCNA, the Cisco exam, Cisco networking. But when I was looking jobs, I found there was a big demand, even though there's a network role. They'd also be asking the server side as well, that you need a bit of knowledge of server side, even though basically the role is for network. So kind of that threw me out. So then I was thinking going to a network, proceeding to taking the CCNA exam and then going to CCNP. But then coming back to job-wise, and then I found out that there's a server knowledge. So I'm just thinking, before I hit and go forward with the CCNA, would I go back to the server side? And then by the time I go back, then I lose another 2 years from there. So when the time's flying, so I just kind of bewildered, a bit confused there.
It's true. And one of the challenges you run into is people do like to see a broad foundation of things that you know. And usually you get some of those organically as you go through these jobs. And it's always, maybe it's a combination of both. Maybe you have the CCNA routing and switching, and you just kind of stop right there. You don't have to go into the CCNP or any of the others. And then maybe you get one of the Microsoft certifications for Windows Server. You know, those are two very good certifications to have on a resume, especially when you're trying to get into IT, that shows I'm very knowledgeable in operating systems, because if you know Windows Server, you can kind of cover the bases with the workstations. And if you're very if you got the CCNA routing and switching, you're extremely knowledgeable on getting a switch and a router up and running, which a lot of companies are looking for too. That's a good 1-2 punch. That's a good combination.
Okay. Thank you, Professor. I'll take your advice, and thank you very much. I really appreciate your videos. I started from A+, Network+. I'm now proceeding to Security+, and all I did was to watch your videos, and also I've been involved with the labs as well. You recommended, so it's really been a good journey. Thank you very much, Professor.
Good for you. You're very welcome, and I did the easy part. You're doing all the hard part, so congratulations to you. Let's go back to the phones. 573 area code. Are you there, caller? What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hey, my name's Tyler. I'm calling from Royal, Missouri.
Welcome, Tyler. What can we do for you?
Yeah, so I have somewhat of a question, and I need a little bit of advice. So recently, I took the CySA Plus exam, and I did end up passing.
Nice.
Now, so my issue that I'm kind of having now is that I've been searching for, cybersecurity positions here in my area, and I feel kind of stuck. I'm 21 years old. I've been in the help desk field for the past 2 years, and I can't seem to get an interview or get anything, even though I have these certifications. I have the schooling under me. I'm not really too sure what other than getting more certifications, like getting the CCNA, like the last guy was talking about,
right,
and kind of working your way up from there. But I don't really have a very clear defined path. The only certifications I have is the A+, the Security Plus, and now the CySA Plus. So I guess my question for you would be, what kind of path do you feel would be right for somebody that's end goal would be getting into cybersecurity?
IT security, what I guess they're calling now is cybersecurity, which I guess we're securing our cybers. I don't know what that is, but that's what we're calling it these days.
Right.
Part of, and this is, I'm approaching this from someone who, I've been doing this full time for about 3 years now, but for almost 7 years before that was working for a next generation firewall company as a systems engineer. And then before that was working as systems engineering and marketing for performance and network monitoring companies. So I really came up through the ranks with networking and protocol analysis, and then got into the security side of things. And that's a very common path. The security team very often is looking for people very knowledgeable in networking that they could bring into the IT security side. And that's because IT security has such a very strong foundation in networking. And I'll give you an example. So let's say you're going to install a firewall. Well, the firewall is probably going to be installed in a layer 3 mode. So the firewall itself will be routing. It's usually on the internet side. So you're probably needing to integrate with some type of dynamic routing protocol on the internet side, which is probably BGP is the protocol you're using there. You're going to need to NAT inside of this firewall to the inside of your network, where you've probably got a 10-dot addressing scheme on the inside. And you probably are setting up a DMZ as well. There's probably one already in the organization. That firewall will also be used as an IPsec tunnel to some partner sites of yours or remote sites. So there will be another set of routes. You're probably building some static routes inside of that, and you're setting up the security piece on that that's going to route that out to that remote site. There's probably also going to be redundancy. You're not going to set up one firewall. That's a recipe for disaster. We need two firewalls. So if something happens to the first one, you've got another firewall there to maintain the connectivity. Are those going to be set up in an active-active configuration or an active-passive? In either one of those, you're going to need to integrate into whatever routing mechanism is happening on the inside of your network. Or if you're connecting on the inside with switching, you're going to need to integrate with the switching mechanisms so that it's able to move over from the primary firewall to the secondary firewall. Or maybe both firewalls are running simultaneously in an active-active mode, which means there's a completely different set of protocols and configurations that have to be set up on the routers and the switches that are on the inside of your network. Very little of that I just said had almost nothing to do with security. There was very little of that had anything to do with security. It was all setting this firewall up on the network. So you have to have this very solid understanding of how the network operates, how these protocols operate, how you set up redundancy with your switches, redundancy with your routers, have your static routes work properly, how the NATing works through these devices, how the connections to remote sites over a WAN are going to operate, how you make sure the traffic goes to the right direction when you're sending it through the router. That's all networking. Now, on top of that, of course, we're on the firewall. We're going to set firewall rules, and there'll be a security component that's layered on the top like some icing. But the rest of the cake is your networking. That's probably more important in many cases than the actual security part that's going on the top. So that's why a lot of these organizations will pull people out of their networking side to become knowledgeable in security or be on the security team, because it's easier to now layer the icing on the top of someone who has already baked this very solid networking cake underneath. And that's why I tell people, if you want to get into security, go do as much as you can on the networking side, because you're going to be doing tons of networking, whether you're not the person who's going to be directly configuring your routers or directly configuring your switches. You're going to be helping them with your firewall implementations and making sure all of this is going to work on your network. And that's just one example of many that I can come up with that have such a dramatic impact on your knowledge of the network. And so I tell people, and it's almost disappointing to see so many networking or security certifications come out, because people are really jumping on the cybersecurity bandwagon, and you should, because there's a massive number of jobs that are available out there for cybersecurity. It's just that not a lot of them are entry level. Almost all of them are pulling in people from other spots that already have that networking knowledge. You may find there are now starting to be more entry-level security jobs because we just don't have enough headcounts available, but you'll have a much better time of it if you're already knowledgeable about the network. That's my opinion of it. I could be wrong, but that's what I've seen as I've gone from place to place to place over those last 7 years or so, going to these organizations and seeing the networking people that I'm now working with in the security groups.
Right. And I mean, I agree with that. You know, a lot of the jobs that I see around here, you know, though, I like to apply for the jobs that I feel like I'm qualified for. You know, if I read the job description and I see that, hey, you know, they want Security Plus, CySA Plus, and maybe like a few other certifications there. But normally, at least around here, they don't mention the networking certification. So I'm like, oh, well, you know, this you be picking. But, you know, yeah, I end up not getting a call back. And I guess my other issue is that, you know, I've tried studying the Net Plus and CCEN and CCNA. And I attempted the Network Plus exam, and I ended up failing it. And then after that, I said, screw it, I'll do the CCEN. You know, I'll just power through it. I didn't ever end up taking that exam, but it's so boring. It's so boring to me, you know? And I don't know how to break through this bore of, you know, this is how packets go through the series of tubes called the internet.
that may not be the
that's a
path to
personal
security for you. You may end up going through the operating system path that ultimately gets you onto the security side, because there's such an emphasis in Linux and operating systems on that as well. So there's multiple ways to get into the IT security side of things. Networking is the first major path, but you'll pull people from other places as well to get into that security side. Maybe operating systems is the better one, but if I was working the odds, networking is the way that you get in the most. But if that doesn't interest you, that probably is not going to be a very fun path to go.
Right.
That's perfectly common. IT's a big place. There's plenty of directions to go and things to do that will end up being extremely successful from a career perspective. It's just finding the right path for you.
I agree. I haven't really thought about it like that. From my perspective, I always see, everybody getting into security roles because of networking, just like you said. And, it never really crossed my mind that there might be people looking to, hire project managers that have a big emphasis in operating system security. But I'll keep that in mind.
There's always different way. And if you have a chance, go to in your geographical area, you may have the CySA organization, which is very focused, a user group very focused on security. So if there's one in your particular area, go to those meetings, meet the security people and ask them, what do I need to do to get a job working in security in your environment? Are you hiring people with knowledge in operating systems? Do you only look at networking? They'll be able to tell you.
Okay. I'll definitely do that.
Best of luck, Tyler.
Yeah, thank you.
Appreciate the call. It's always trying to find that way in. And maybe it's not a jump. Maybe it's an incremental move. And you just start making the incremental moves to get into the positions you're looking to get into. Quite a challenge. So very quickly in the chat room, somebody said they were looking at the Security Plus 401 versus 501. And the only difference they see is some Network Plus stuff in there. I listed out the number of topics in the 501 exam, and I looked at how many of those topics were new. 60%, 60. More than half the exam was brand new topics that were not covered in the 401. They're two different exams. It's two different things completely, not even remotely similar to each other. Don't get stuck. Don't study for the 401 and take the 501 exam. You'll do horribly. Don't do that. Always study for materials that match the version of the exam you plan on taking, and you'll do fine. Quickly back to the phones. 513 area code. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Patrick. And thank you, Professor. I'm just new to the IT field. I'm just trying to get my CompTIA A. Matter of fact, I take my CompTIA 901 tomorrow.
Wow.
And yeah. And I have been studying up to this point, but I'm trying to think of what would be the best way to study the day before the test.
Yep. This is obviously a very common question. Usually I like to see, what do I do the week before the test? But day before is too, we can use the same strategy. The best strategy I can ever recommend to people is to make sure you have a copy of the exam objectives, maybe download them. If you're the kind of person who likes something tactile, print the exam objectives out and then start going through each one of the exam objectives. And if you can explain to someone else what that particular exam objective is about, you can cross it off your list. And just go through each one of those objectives. The exam stays very, very, very close to the objectives. They don't tend to go off the page. But the objectives usually are listing a single thing. They'll say here's an interface, and you need to know the speeds of this interface and what they look like. Those are relatively straightforward. It's when you get into the troubleshooting section that becomes a little more murky. It becomes a little more difficult. You have to have enough hands-on to be able to handle these situations when there's a problem. With a day left, there's not a lot of time for hands-on, but it's worth going through that section because they list out specific problems that you might run into. You turn on the computer and it says that a service couldn't be started. You turn on the computer and you got a blank screen. You turn on the computer and it keeps cycling through the reboots. So they give you a finite number of problems that you could possibly run into that might be on the exam. So that might help you a little bit, that you don't have to know every possible problem, but there's a good subset that are listed there.
Yeah, that's the first thing I was doing over the last week is I was more doing the situational stuff, and I was trying to stay away from the multiple choice parts of the test. There was also a lot of abbreviations, at least from what I said when I printed out the objectives. They were showing a lot of abbreviations as far as those go. I don't know if that's going to make up a certain percentage of the test as well. I mean, at least from what I saw, the objectives, they have it pretty well split up. One of the largest, I think, was having to do with what you were talking about earlier about the different speeds and everything else. Was like 35% of the test was hardware.
Right.
And then they have certain 20% is software, and then the whatever networking they can actually put on the 901 part of the test. Anyway, those are the ones that I've seen, at least from those objectives. What I was trying to do over the last week anyway is I was trying to study the situational parts of the test, where like if you need, where do you put this PCI card, or where do you put this DRAM chip or whatever, those kinds of things. That's one of the things that I was able to see, at least from the objectives, and I did print out the objectives, so
Excellent.
That was one of the first things I was looking at.
Very little of the exam is trivia. Almost none of the exam is asking you to define what one of those abbreviations means. So they're not going to ask you, for ECC memory, what does the ECC stand for? They're not going to ask you that. They're going to ask you, here's a scenario where we're considering ECC memory. Should we put it into this device? Which of these devices would fit best? That's what they're really looking for.
That definitely alleviated a little my anxiety anyway, because I was kind of worried about the how better way to putting it, the memory game, so to speak.
There's not a lot of trivia that, a lot of people spend a lot of time memorizing pin numbers on the memory, thinking that that's what CompTIA is asking for. But if you look at the exam objectives, CompTIA is asking you to be able to identify these things by sight. So I don't know any other way to describe it other than here's how big it is, and how many pins it has on it. But they're really going to show you. They might show you a picture and say, "What is this thing?" You would guess, looking at the size of it and the number of pins that you see on the screen, you can kind of guess what that particular memory module happens to be. They're not asking you for trivia of, you have a laptop and you took a memory module out. How many pins is on that module? That's not what they're asking for. They're asking to see if you recognize what that thing looks like. So don't get too far into the weeds. Don't worry about that list of abbreviations in the back of the exam objectives. Focus on the main part of the exam objectives. Go through all of those different topics. Circle the things that you just don't feel solid with, and that's where you should be cramming in the last 24 hours.
Good. That's exactly what I needed to know. Thank you so much, Doc.
Absolutely. Best of luck.
All right. Thank you.
It's exciting getting that last bit in. Take the exam tomorrow. You may find that it's just the normal thing. It's not a big deal. If you're well prepared, you walk in, the answers really should jump out at you. If you're looking at a question and it's just not gelling for you, that may be a question of knowledge that you just haven't gotten down yet. Flag it and come back to it. Go to the next thing. And have the ones that are jumping out at you and you say, yep, that's what it is, you're going to do fine on. And it's really a combination of getting a good book, watching the videos, getting plenty of Q&A practice with wherever you can get them from, and getting plenty of hands-on. If you have those four things, you're going to do fine on the exam, regardless of which exam it is. That really applies not just to CompTIA, but to Cisco and Microsoft and VMware and Palo Alto Networks, and it doesn't matter. You're going to run into all of these every time. You got those four things. You're going to do well. A good book, good video series, get some good Q&A, get plenty of hands-on, and you're going to do just fine. And that is what I will leave you with. As we finish up this particular study group, we were able to get through, 2.5 hours. That's pretty good with all of those pieces, getting through all of those. Hopefully you were able to get some of that information in there too. Thank you for joining me in the first hour for the Q&A. I obviously Could not do it without you being here. It would be kind of boring if it was just me answering my own questions. So thank you so much for that. And thank you for your questions in the chat room. Thank you for the folks that are calling in and asking the questions. We really couldn't do it without you. We've got next week at this time is our Network Plus study group. Join us next month. Remember, we're skipping the first Wednesday of next month. So in June, we're going to the second Wednesday for the A+ study group. And we'll see you back here then. Thanks for joining us this time. We will see you next time on the A+ study group.